Chapter 1375. Although she was wearing men's clothes and could avoid the soldiers holding the portraits, for safety's sake, she didn't walk on the main road and took small paths. Moreover, according to the fierce cavalry style, it was impossible for them to expose themselves in front of everyone, so she did her best to choose a hidden path. She had bought some dry rations beforehand, so if she was hungry, she would take it out to fill her stomach. If she was thirsty, she would find a stream to drink. She had already learned her wilderness survival skills when she was in Lien City. The fierce, valiant cavalry were hidden guards that did not appear in the open, and they had to adapt to all kinds of environments. Sometimes, in order to obtain information, they had to stay in the wild grass for 3 days and 3 nights without moving. In those few years, she had also trained with them, not only to improve her own abilities, but also to be able to deal with any sudden situations. Thinking back to those times, although it was a bit bitter, it was very fulfilling and filled her with nostalgia. She tightly gripped the water bottle in her hand. No matter what, she had to find them. However, at this time, she felt that something was off. Her eyes fell onto the swaying leaves not far away and her eyes narrowed. She pretended to casually drink a mouthful of water, but she already had a plan in her heart. She thought that she had changed her clothes and darkened her face, but she was still being watched. After resting for a bit and recovering her strength, she pretended not to notice the other side's tracks before continuing forward with her bag. This time she chose a more remote and narrow mountain path. Like this, if the other side wanted to avoid being discovered, they wouldn't dare follow too closely. Like this, she would have enough time to hide herself. After a few blinks of an eye, there was already no one in front of her. Pang Huang stood on the mountain path and looked at the endless green forest. He gave a soft snort. She definitely hasn't gone far. You guys split up. I don't believe this prince can't catch her. After a few leaps, Chu Qingyan stopped on a huge rock under a tree. She fanned herself with her hand, thinking that she had shaken them off. She heaved a sigh of relief and wanted to strike while the iron was hot to continue her journey. However, her ears twitched and she stopped in her tracks. Several large men with cold expressions appeared in front of her. She took a few steps back and found that there were several people blocking her path. She knit her brows, knowing that it was the group of people following her. Who are you? What are you trying to do? Although these people were dressed like Sichuan people, their appearance was rough, and their bodies were stronger than the Sichuan people. She guessed that these people were not Sichuan people at all. These people didn't intend to respond to her at all. They just looked at her coldly. Just as she was getting impatient and was about to make a move, she heard a rustling sound from the grass beside her. Could it be that the main character had arrived? Young General Chu, I haven't seen you for a long time. I'm afraid it's not in line with the reputation of Sichuan, a country of etiquette, right? Chu Qingyan's grip on her sword tightened when she heard the familiar and chilling voice. She turned around in disbelief. When she saw Pang Huang, who was dressed in a navy blue robe and had a jade-like face, standing in front of the thicket, she felt like an egg could be stuffed into her mouth. Who could tell her, why would the crown prince of the neighboring country appear here? Although he couldn't see the change in her expression because of the veil, he could still figure it out from her movements. Pang Huang walked forward a few steps until she vigilantly tensed her body. Only then did he stop 10 feet away. Seeing this prince, you seem very surprised? But this prince feels very honored that young General Chu has not forgotten this prince. His confident voice had a satisfied smile. Pang Huang stared at her with sparkling eyes. Chu Qingyan's lips twitched and she said in a somewhat speechless voice, who wouldn't be surprised to see the crown prince of an enemy country appear in their territory? Moreover, it has only been half a year since we lost to your southern blue country. This general is not so forgetful that I can't even recognize the enemy's appearance. The large man beside Pang Huang was about to angrily teach her a lesson when he heard this, but Pang Huang raised his hand to stop him. He smiled and his eyes revealed a look of admiration. You're still so eloquent. With just a few words, you're able to make people panic. You're truly worthy of being the famous young General Chu on the battlefield. Chu Qingyan replied with a chuckle. The crown prince still hides a knife in his smile. With just a few words, you're able to make people have no choice but to treat you seriously. You're truly worthy of being the southern blue country's famous smiling tiger. Admirable, admirable. Bold, you actually dare to insult our crown prince. The attendant immediately raised his sword to counter. Chu Qingyan raised her eyebrows and looked at Pang Huang with a provocative gaze. Pang Huang waved his subordinates away and looked at the beautiful jade-like girl in front of him. His eyes sparkled. Young General Chu is very brave. I wonder if this prince has the honor to invite the young general for a drink? This invitation probably had an ulterior motive. Chu Qingyan gave a cold smile. The crown prince's invitation is this one's honor, but this one is in a hurry, so I'm afraid I can't accompany you. If there is a chance, let's chat again another day. After saying this, she cupped her hands and looked at the blocked path, indicating for her subordinates to move aside. The smile on Pang Huang's face did not change. Young general, this prince knows that you are in a hurry to find someone, but in this vast sea of people, you won't be able to find anyone in a short time. Since there's no time like the present, why don't we sit down first and have a chat? This prince is very interested in the tactics you use on the battlefield. I'm indebted to Crown Prince Pang for thinking so highly of me. However, this one is in a hurry, so I really can't drink with Crown Prince Pang. I ask for Crown Prince's forgiveness. Chu Qingyan's tone was cold, and she was just short of telling them to scram. No matter what, Pang Huang was still the crown prince of a country. Although he appreciated her, seeing that she didn't know what was good for her again and again, the smile on his face completely disappeared. His voice was filled with pressure. Are you planning to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? Chu Qingyan's face did not reveal anything, but her palm had already begun to move. This one hasn't tried being forced to drink a forfeit yet, so how about I ask for some advice today? He had never seen such a stubborn person in front of him, so his heart was filled with anger. All right, then let this prince see how much your martial arts have improved after not seeing you for half a year. Hearing his tone, she felt uncomfortable, but this was what she wanted to do. Dong Ting had transferred all his internal energy to her, but she still had not tested just how much her cultivation had improved. Go. Pang Huang took a step back and the people behind him immediately surrounded Chu Qingyan. They surrounded her and coldly pointed their swords at her. Bullying the weak with numbers, bullying the weak with strength, it really is the style of your southern blue. Chu Qingyan's lips curled as she spoke without any mercy. You, Pang Huang's face was very ugly. Before he could finish, the other side had already moved. The long sword came out of its sheath and sand flew into the air. The falling leaves and flowers were dazzling. Chapter 1376. Chu Qingyan had always wanted to know how much her skills had improved. Thus, when she saw that her opponent, who was extremely skilled in martial arts, was knocked back with a single strike, she was instantly stunned. She instantly killed her opponent like this? Dong Ting really left her a large pleasant surprise. Before she had time to be happy, the other side became even more irritable because she had injured their comrade. All kinds of life-threatening moves were sent at her. Pang Huang, who had been watching from the side, saw her easily take care of one of his guards. It would be a lie if he wasn't shocked. When did this person's martial arts progress this fast? It could simply be described as terrifying. His careless eyes suddenly became serious as he narrowed his eyes, not letting go of a single move from her. Actually, her moves were the same, but when she used them, they were several times stronger than before. Although she had not completely digested the internal energy Dong Ting gave her, it was more than enough to deal with these people. She was like a slippery loach as she swam among these people. The guards fell one by one, and when she pulled back her sword for the last time, the ground was littered with people groaning in pain. Her lips curled and then she turned to take care of the final enemy, Pang Huang. However, when she pointed at him, an archer appeared out of nowhere and aimed at her. The tip of the arrow shone eerily under the sun, almost blinding her eyes. She did not look at the archers and turned to look at Pang Huang standing behind them. Her lips curled into a faint smile. Prince Pang, is this the demeanor of a country's ruler? Fighting with numbers? Bullying others? How could Pang Huang not hear her taunting? But he had always been thick-skinned, especially after meeting her. Many thanks for little General Chu's praise. Chu Qingyan coldly looked at him. Prince Pang, since you already know my identity, there is no need to call me little general. It makes me feel uncomfortable hearing it. Pang Huang gave a shrug. This prince thought you would like it, so of course I don't mind calling you Qingyan. However, you'll blame me for not knowing how to be gentle. I don't know why, but hearing this girl's name from your mouth, my entire body feels uncomfortable. It's best if you know one thing, we aren't familiar with each other, so don't call me by my name. Otherwise it will annoy me. When she was separated from Big Ice Cube, her heart was filled with worry. Now that this Qing Yaojin had appeared, she was filled with anger. Chu Qingyan did not care about his identity as the crown prince at all as she casually taunted him. Being in a high position, he was used to being welcomed by others. Now that he was being mocked by her again and again, even if Pang Huang had a good impression of her, he couldn't help being filled with anger. His hands clenched fists as he suppressed his anger to suppress it all to suppress it. But when the guard beside him asked if he should shoot, he made a hand gesture, indicating for them not to act rashly. He walked out under Chu Qingyan's provocative gaze and his voice was filled with power. Little General, there is an old saying that a scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at with new eyes. After not seeing you for half a year, your martial arts have improved quite a bit, so this prince wants to ask you for advice. Reaching out his hand, someone handed over his large blade. Chu Qingyan unconsciously tightened her grip on the sword in her hand. She had fought with Pang Huang before and his martial arts were unfathomable. In the valley, she could feel that he was not using his full strength. Now that her martial arts had increased quite a bit, she could fight with him and test the depths of his martial arts. But her mouth still did not let him off. You were heavily injured half a year ago, could it be that you've already recovered? If you haven't, wouldn't it be said that this misses bullying a handicapped person? Pang Huang almost couldn't hold the long blade in his hand. This person really didn't know what to say. Although he felt that she had a sharp tongue before, it wasn't to the point of being poisonous. It seemed like he still didn't understand her. Once he caught her, he would definitely not let her leave his body and let her know just how strong he was. You want to anger me? It's a pity that you've made a mistake. Chu Qingyan gave a soft snort. She never thought that he would see through her provocation this quickly. Once a person was angered, they would reveal a flaw, but it was a pity that he did not fall for it. Pang Huang felt that this person really was a strange girl. At this time, she could still scheme against him with just a few words. It was a pity that after suffering from her, he had learned his lesson and would not fall for her trap so easily. She raised her head to look at the sky. If she didn't leave this place before the sun set, then she might become a snack for the wild beasts in the mountains. She couldn't delay any longer. Seeing that this person seemed to have the mood to continue chatting with her, Chu Qingyan's lips twitched. Before he could open his mouth, she took the initiative to swing her sword at him. This sword was fast and fierce. Pang Huang's gaze fell onto her white as jade fingers. Then he raised his blade to block and counterattacked. She did not think that she would be able to take care of him with a single sword, so even though her first move was broken, she still had another move. Pang Huang knew that her cultivation had made a large leap, but he never thought that it would be to this extent. When experts exchanged blows, as long as they touched the sword, they would know the other party's strength. It could be seen that her cultivation was deep, but he could feel that she was not that proficient in using her internal energy. This was an opportunity that he could take advantage of. When the two of them brushed past each other, Pang Huang suddenly reached out his other hand to grab the brim of her hat. With a little force, the curtain hat fell into his hand. When the two of them landed, Chu Qingyan turned around and her cold gaze fell onto the curtain hat in his hand. Why did this person grab her hat for? Crazy. Pang Huang casually threw the curtain hat away and then looked up at her. Her hair was tied up high with a white jade hairpin. 2 strands of hair fell down in front of her forehead, adding a bit of elegance. Her ink-black eyes were large, sparkling under the sun. Her snow-white skin and red lips, her small face was so delicate that people couldn't help but want to reach out and touch it. He didn't know if it was softer than spring water. Her red clothes were like fire and her waist was tied with a belt of the same color, making her seem even more slender. She held a sword in her hand that shined with a silver light. Her entire body seemed to be shrouded in a holy light, making people's hearts yearn for her. From the moment he saw her today, his heart was itching. He wanted to take off this hindrance hat and see her beauty. Now that he saw her, a jade-like beauty could not be better. He could feel the blood in his body surging. He had to make her stay. Even if he had to imprison her by his side, he would not hesitate to break her wings. Moreover, he had to take her down today. Otherwise, if he wanted to catch her next time, it would not be that easy. Chu Qingyan naturally did not know what he was thinking. She only felt that his gaze on her body was so hot that it made her feel irritated. She looked around, thinking of a way to escape. Qingyan, have you ever thought of leaving Xiao Su and me? Chapter 1377. He called her by her name and did not address himself as such. Instead, he addressed her as I. This surprised Chu Qingyan a little. She did not understand why he was suddenly showing her kindness. Furthermore, this kindness was based on his gaze, which made her uncomfortable. What do you mean? Chu Qingyan looked at him coldly. She held her sword in front of her, a common defensive posture. Pang Huang felt helpless. This person was still guarded against him, but her temper had always been like this. He should have gotten used to it long ago. He raised his eyebrows and chuckled. Qingyan, you also know the current situation in Sichuan. If you continue to stay by Xiao Su's side, you won't have a good ending. But if you leave Xiao Su, those people won't let you off. After all, you are the future consort of the King of England, so for your safety, you should seek greater protection. After he finished speaking, he saw her looking at him silently. He thought that he had persuaded her, so he immediately said, Xiao Su offended your emperor. If you want to escape unscathed, there's no one more suitable than me. I'll still say the same thing. As long as you leave Xiao Su, I won't pursue your past, and will give you everything you want. Thank you for remembering my identity as the consort of the King of England. She automatically ignored the word future, then sneered, and you say it as if you know what I want. From the first time they met until now, every time he saw her, he would spare no effort to persuade her to betray the ice cube and leave with him. She was already numb to rejecting him. How could this person be so blind? She was really worried about how this person would harm the common people after inheriting the Southern Blue Throne. However, this was not within her scope of concern. Pang Huang didn't seem to understand the sarcasm in her words. He humbly and seriously asked, You can tell me what you want. I believe that I won't do worse than Xiao Su. Chu Qingyan really wanted to laugh when she heard this. How could this person be so confident that he could compare to the ice cube? A despicable person was invincible as expected. She also answered him very seriously, What if I say that I want to stay by my highness' side? Can the crown prince even satisfy this? The smile on Pang Huang's face instantly cracked. He felt that his dignity had been severely trampled on. If it weren't for the fact that she was important to him, he wouldn't have lowered his pride and followed her. Did she know how many women in the southern blue continent would strip naked just to get his attention? This person simply didn't know what was good for her. However, he didn't know what to do with her. He was afraid that he would accidentally hurt her. Just as he was hesitating whether or not to shoot her down, Chu Qingyan saw the opportunity. A gust of wind blew, and she quickly took out a cloth bag and threw it at them. Crown Prince, be careful. An arrow pierced through the air and shot towards the cloth bag. The cloth bag exploded and the white stuff immediately scattered in all directions. When the wind blew, it blurred everyone's eyes. Chu Qingyan, who was standing in the wind, snorted and then turned around to hide in the lush forest. This was the flower she had bought from the inn's waiter before she left. It was to prepare for an emergency. She didn't think that it would really come in handy. She hoped that it would delay them and give her time to escape. Although her martial arts had improved, it was still difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. She didn't dare to be careless. Of the 36 stratagems, escaping was the best strategy. After the powder dissipated, Pang Huang's group was covered in flour from head to toe. They looked very miserable. Your Highness, the person ran away. Looking at the empty mountain path, Pang Huang wiped his face and sinisterly said, "She couldn't have run far. Send out the signal and have the others quickly search the mountain." Chu Qingyan, this time I came prepared. I don't believe that after I set up an inescapable net, you'll still be able to escape from my grasp. Chu Qingyan, who was using her qinggong to quickly shuttle through the mountain forest, suddenly sneezed. She rubbed her nose. Who was it that was speaking ill of her behind her back? She didn't have time to think about it and continued on her way. However, she had underestimated the size of this mountain forest. After rushing for more than 2 hours, she still hadn't walked out of this large mountain range. She even got lost. Seeing that the sun was approaching the western mountains, she couldn't help but feel a little anxious. At this time, a tiger's roar came from the distance. A flock of birds flew with the wind. In this lush forest, it gave people a strange and eerie feeling. In the 5 years that she had stayed with Big Ice Cube, they had often entered the mountain forest to train. They knew that the more tranquil a place was, the more dangerous it was. Thinking of Pang Huang's group from before, she couldn't help but secretly curse. There really was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to leave this place tonight. She hoped that she wouldn't encounter any wild beasts and that she wouldn't be caught by Pang Huang's people. Just as she was preparing to find a place to hide and rest for the night, her ears twitched. There were dozens of people flying in her direction. She couldn't help but throw away her bag. These people were really like ghosts that wouldn't disperse. She once again flew forward. However, this time she found that there were people not only behind her, but also on her left and right. She frowned. Was she surrounded? There was no one in front of her, but she had a premonition that someone was waiting for her in front. Sure enough, when she rushed out of the lush forest, the view in front of her suddenly widened. She was at the edge of a cliff, and there was a tall and straight figure with his back facing her, as if he was admiring the sunset that was about to set in the west. "Pang Huang, what do you want?" Chu Qingyan didn't have the leisure to look at the beautiful golden light. Her tone was filled with anger. Pang Huang sighed. It was such a beautiful day, but she only cared about questioning and didn't know how to appreciate it. She had really let down his good intentions. He slowly turned around and looked at the young girl who was bathed in the sunset. His eyes were filled with flames. "Come with me to the southern Blue Mountains." "In your dreams?" Chu Qingyan refused without thinking. These 2 words were very clean, not leaving him any face at all. Pang Huang's heart was filled with anger, but he didn't try to reason with her. "Qingyan, what is so good about Xiao Su that you are this loyal to him? If he was sincere to you, you wouldn't have fallen into this kind of situation, right?" "You're wrong about one thing." "What is it?" "I am not loyal to him, I am in love with him." Pang Huang was stunned. The person in front of him was not ashamed to admit her feelings for another person at all. This kind of firm and loyal appearance moved his heart even more than her beautiful face. This made him even more determined to obtain her. "I wanted to ask you to come with me, but you kept rejecting me, so this prince can only use force." He spoke in a dignified manner, like he was innocent. Chu Qingyan pulled out her sword again. "Then let's see if you have the skills." Even if she died, she wouldn't fall into his hands. The pursuers behind her closed in on her from 3 sides. Even the light of the setting sun couldn't warm up the cold sword tips. Perhaps she would die here today. It was a pity she couldn't see the big ice block's final side. At this time, the cry of an eagle came from the bottom of the cliff. Other than her, no one else noticed it. Chapter 1378. A flock of birds flew up in a panic from the bottom of the cliff, flying in the direction of the setting sun. Following this, wolf howls came from not far away. It was a bit more familiar than the wolf howls from before. The fingers holding the long sword trembled slightly, but her lips couldn't help curling into a smile. It was filled with surprise, joy, emotion, complicated emotions, and excitement. Pang Huang did not understand why she could still smile at this time, but the smile under her beautiful face was as beautiful as a butterfly breaking out of its cocoon. It made him lose his mind, and he even forgot to give the order. This was the time. Chu Qingyan did not pay attention to the opponent behind her. She raised her sword and stabbed in Pang Huang's direction. When the sword arrived in front of him, Pang Huang finally came back to his senses. He took a few steps back and suddenly remembered that there was a cliff behind him, so he immediately dodged to the side. Chu Qingyan had never thought that she would be able to take his life like this, and that was not her goal. She stepped onto a rock at the edge of the cliff and turned to look at Pang Huang. As he cried out in surprise, she jumped forward without a care for her own safety. Qingyan, Pang Huang felt as if his heart had been grabbed by a pair of invisible hands, suffocating him to the point that he could not breathe. He immediately reached out to pull her over, but her clothes slipped past his palm. Like the mountain wind, he could not catch them at all. He subconsciously wanted to jump down with her, but was held back by the guards behind him, who were drenched in cold sweat from fright. "Your Highness, you have to calm down. Don't do something stupid." Something stupid? That's right. Why would this Chu Qingyan do something stupid? He just wanted her to leave the Sichuan with him, so why would she rather jump off the cliff than leave with him? This fact was something that the proud Pang Huang could not accept. He threw off the subordinates holding him. After making it clear to them that he wouldn't jump down in a hot-headed manner, they wouldn't stare at him like this. He patted the creases on his clothes and then looked down from the cliff. He could only see the clouds and mist that blocked his line of sight. Just now, he remembered that she was like a fire butterfly transformed from a ball of fire. She plunged headfirst into the misty clouds and then disappeared without a trace. For the first time in his life, he felt helpless and bitter in his heart. Did such a fiery woman disappear from his life just like that? While the top of the cliff was silent, the bottom of the cliff was bustling with noise and excitement. Chu Qingyan was lying on her stomach among the black feathers. She poked the eagle's back and said sourly, "As the owner, I don't have enough to eat and wear, but you've put on so much weight. It's really infuriating to compare yourself to your pet." Little Hai, who was under her, flapped its wings in protest. If it wasn't full, how could it have the strength to look for her? If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have come to pick up her heartless master. At the same time, several of Xiao Hai's subordinates were also carrying bai yutang, snowflake cake, and glutinous rice ball towards them. The moment they saw her, they immediately started howling. If they weren't in midair, they would have jumped over and pounced on her. Then, they would run into her arms and act coquettishly. Looking at the light in their eyes that couldn't be ignored, and hearing their low cries, Chu Qingyan's eyes couldn't help but turn red. During this period of hiding, she really missed them to death. The great change that day came so suddenly. She didn't dare to imagine whether Xiao Lai-Chi and the others could protect them. She missed them so much the whole way. Now that she saw them alive and kicking in front of her eyes, she felt like she was dreaming. Seeing her watery eyes, they thought something happened to her and clamored to rush over. She saw the eagles trembling in fear and immediately shouted, "Lie down, don't move." Only then did Bai Yutang and the others obediently lie down on the eagle's back. They didn't dare to move, but their eyes were glued to her body, unable to leave for even a moment. She then threw a big smile at them, indicating that they should stay there obediently. At this time, Xiao Hai tilted its head and called out to her, as if asking her opinion on where to go. They had already been circling in the air for a while. Chu Qingyan looked down. There were brambles and thorns below, making it difficult to land. She changed her mind and looked at the few lying on the ground. "In this forest, how many companions can you gather?" Bai Yutang didn't answer, but used actions to prove everything. It sat up and howled to the sky. Just as its voice fell, wolf howls sounded one after another. In a moment, the whole forest was filled with wolf howls. Chu Qingyan grinned. As expected of her family's treasure, its summoning technique was so shocking. "Let's go and take revenge for your beloved master." Glutinous rice ball and snowflake cake immediately sat up, revealing their sharp fangs. Daring to bully their master, they didn't want to live anymore. Pang Huang stood silently at the edge of the cliff. He didn't make a sound, and his subordinates also didn't dare to make a sound. However, the quiet bottom of the cliff suddenly became noisy. There was the sound of something breaking through the air, as well as the cries of eagles and wolves. Following that, a gust of air rushed up to the sky. The wind and waves rushed to his cheeks. Pang Huang was so shocked that he couldn't help but take a few steps back. Right at this moment, a fiery red figure jumped out from the bottom of the cliff. Her black hair and snow-white skin were so dazzling. Other people were great rocks that rose with the wind in a day, soaring 90,000 miles in the sky. However, she was an eagle that soared high in the sky. Her domineering appearance was accompanied by a lethal pet. Chu Qingyan sat upright in the air and looked down at the frightened crowd. Her red lips curled up. "You didn't expect me to still be alive, right?" Compared to the shock of the others, Pang Huang heaved a sigh of relief. His eyes looked at her greedily, as if he wanted to imprint her appearance in his heart. When he was standing at the edge of the cliff just now, he felt as if a corner of his heart was missing. If he couldn't see her again in the future, how many surprises would he lose in life? Now that she had once again descended from the sky, his heart was filled with joy and surprise. The feeling of regaining something that he had lost was simply too wonderful. Chu Qingyan saw that he didn't answer her question. Instead, he stared at her with a gaze that she couldn't understand and even smiled. The corner of her mouth twitched. This person couldn't have been scared out of his wits by her, right? However, she had patience. The pets behind her who were protecting their master had already lost their patience. They howled to the sky and jumped from the back of the eagle into the crowd, beginning to tear and bite. Pang Huang immediately ordered people to resist. However, in the blink of an eye, dozens of fierce wolves appeared around them and pounced on them without any explanation. Not long after, miserable cries came from below. Chu Qingyan snorted softly. She had no interest in staying to watch the battle between humans and wolves. She had more important things to do. She called back Glutinous Rice Ball and the others and prepared to leave on the eagle. Pang Huang, who was in the middle of dealing with the wolf pack, saw that she was about to leave and immediately shouted, "Qingyan, you have a unique ability, so why do you still want to stay by Xiao Su's side? If you follow him, you have no future." Chu Qingyan didn't even look at him as she whispered in Little Hai's ear, "Let's go find His Highness and Father." Little C chirped happily. It turned around and flew towards the setting sun with her. White Jade Ball and the others howled at their wolf pack a few times, telling them to properly entertain these evil people who bullied their master before leaving in satisfaction. Pang Huang looked at the person riding the wind, and his heart was filled with unwillingness and jealousy. "Xiao Su, one day I will make you crawl at my feet." Chapter 1379. In the imperial study, the Sichuan emperor was flipping through the progress of Commandery Prince Chongha's case over the past few days. The more he read, the more his brows furrowed. This was the biggest case of court officials committing crimes since Xiao Su went north to deal with those corrupt officials 5 years ago. The people involved were not only court officials but also local officials. It was like pulling grass vines. Every pull was accurate. Even the branches and leaves were pulled out. Even if the bones were broken, the tendons were still connected. Moreover, it was such a complicated mess of people. At this time, Commandery Prince Chongha was standing in front of him and bowing to ask for instructions. He undoubtedly wanted to see if he should continue investigating. The Sichuan emperor rubbed his brows and looked up at the Commandery Prince who had not spoken since he presented the memorial. His eyes darkened. "Commandery Prince, what do you think should be done?" Commandery Prince Chongha moved his shoulders and raised his lowered head. He said calmly, "It depends on what kind of result your majesty wants to achieve." "Tell me, Commandery Prince." The Sichuan emperor put down the memorial and looked at him with bright eyes. Commandery Prince Chongha smiled and continued, "If your majesty wants to get rid of the parasites in the court over the years, you should find them all and not let any of them go. If your majesty wants to achieve a deterrent effect without implicating too many people, then you only need to remove the left and right prime ministers and deal with the others at your discretion. However, this old official knows what your majesty is worried about." The Sichuan emperor smiled. "Commandery Prince, have you guessed it?" Commandery Prince Chongha still smiled faintly. "The first method is bound to cause unrest in the court. All the civil and military officials will feel insecure and will not be interested in court affairs. Also, if too many officials are executed at once, There will be vacancies and it will affect the people. The second method is more bark than bite. Although a group of people is executed, a group of people is left behind. Your Majesty will be wary of them. Even if you use them in the future, you will not be so assured. Therefore, both methods have their pros and cons. Your Majesty will find it difficult to choose. Sichuan Emperor ordered someone to arrange a seat for Commandery Prince Chonghe. Then he patted his thigh and sighed. Commandery Prince is right. This is what Zhen is conflicted about. He raised his head to look at Commandery Prince Chonghe. Then which method does Commandery Prince think is more appropriate? The Duke shook his head. Even His Majesty can't decide. How can this old official understand? The Sichuan Emperor chuckled. He was still as sly as ever, not giving him any advice at all. However, he had already made up his mind. If I want to clean up all the factions again, how confident are you, County King? Commandery Prince Chonghe was not surprised at all. From his swift and decisive actions a few days ago, he knew that the Emperor had already made up his mind. That depends on what kind of effect your Majesty wants to achieve. Sichuan Emperor sneered in his heart. What a sly old man. Of course, we're going to uproot those who are disloyal. Including those who support the fourth prince? Commandery Prince Chonghe was not worried about offending the Emperor at all. Sichuan Emperor looked straight at him for a while before nodding slowly. Including. If your Majesty gives me your full support, this old official is 80% confident. Commandery Prince Chonghe looked down and replied. Good. Sichuan Emperor smiled. This way, when Ranner inherits my position in the future, the court will be filled with loyal and patriotic officials. It will be easier for him to take care of them. Perhaps it was because he had completely fallen out with Xiao Su, but Sichuan Emperor did not hide his approval of Xiao Ran and his decision to make him the crown prince in the future. Commandery Prince Chonghe's eyebrows twitched. He narrowed his eyes and disagreed. Your Majesty, this seems a little inappropriate. According to the Sichuan Emperor's succession since ancient times, if the legitimate son is still alive, as long as he doesn't have any moral problems, the legitimate eldest prince should inherit the throne. Commandery Prince Chonghe, are you trying to disagree with me? Sichuan Emperor stopped smiling and responded coldly. Commandery Prince Chonghe smiled. This old official doesn't dare. After all, honest advice is unpleasant to the ear. This old official is just speaking the truth. What a good truth. Sichuan Emperor snorted coldly and looked aggressive. If I depose Liang Yuan and appoint Consort Yu as the Empress, then Ranner will be the legitimate son. Then it will be reasonable for him to be chosen as the crown prince. Your Majesty, you can't be so willful and rash. The Empress has no moral problems. If you depose her so easily, I'm afraid it will be difficult to explain to the court and the people. Commandery Prince Chonghe's expression changed slightly and could not help but advise. Sichuan Emperor heard this and was about to reprimand him for his insubordination when eunuch Xiao hurried in with a guard. Your Majesty, this subordinate has important military intelligence to report. The guard knelt on the ground and said with a panicked expression. When Sichuan Emperor heard that it was military intelligence, he did not care about Commandery Prince Chonghe's rebellious words and immediately said, "Speak." When General Li was chasing after the King of England and his men, he discovered an army coming from the north. They appeared very suddenly and were well trained and fully equipped. Each of them is an elite. Everyone present was stunned. Sichuan Emperor said angrily, "How many people are there? Who is the leader? Why did you only discover it now? There are about 100,000 of them. I don't know what method they used to hide their tracks, but the spies only discovered them now. The leader is." The guard lowered his head and did not dare to say it out loud. Sichuan Emperor stood up and smashed the teacup on the table to the ground. "Speak, who is it?" He really raised a bunch of good-for-nothings. They had already attacked, but they only discovered it now. If they had been any later, the enemy would have attacked the capital. The guard did not dare to hide anything. It's a man named Fong Lu. He used to be the personal guard of the King of England. Later, he was promoted to Deputy General because of his meritorious service. Sichuan Emperor's body could not help but sway. He supported himself on the table while Eunuch Xiao was worried. He said angrily, "He really rebelled. He really dared to rebel." As he spoke, he looked angrily at Commandery Prince Chonghe, who was standing to the side. "Look, this is the eldest legitimate prince that you said has no moral problems. He has already led his troops to rebel against my world." Commandery Prince Chonghe closed his eyes and sighed heavily. Seeing that Sichuan Emperor had smashed everything in the imperial study, Eunuch Xiao immediately escorted Commandery Prince Chonghe out of the hall to prevent innocent people from being hurt. Commandery Prince Chonghe and Eunuch Xiao stood outside the hall and listened to the noise coming from inside. Both of them looked at each other and smiled bitterly. "Eunuch Xiao, you have been with His Majesty for 40 to 50 years. When have you ever seen him so panicked?" Commandery Prince Chonghe said softly. Eunuch Xiao shook his head. "Never. Actually, you can't blame that child, Su. All of this is His Majesty's own sin." Commandery Prince Chonghe shook his head and turned to leave. Eunuch Xiao watched the old figures slowly disappear into the distance. Bitterness filled his heart. He had been with His Majesty since he was young. He had witnessed His Majesty go from a prince to the crown prince and then to the prosperous emperor he was today. He knew that His Majesty was not so cruel and merciless in the beginning. However, as time passed and he experienced so much, his mentality changed. The more he obtained, the more reluctant he was to let go. That was why he was in this situation today. However, regardless of whether the road ahead was flourishing or full of ruins, he would continue to accompany His Majesty. Chapter 1380. After venting his anger, the Sichuan Emperor still felt that the anger in his heart had not subsided. However, he no longer had the strength to smash anything. He slumped weakly on the dragon throne, as if he had just been fished out of the water, breathing heavily. At this time, Eunuch Xiao came in with tea. When he saw the pale-faced emperor, he hurried over and fanned him with a fan. He said worriedly, "Your Majesty, please calm down. Drink some tea to moisten your throat." The Sichuan Emperor picked up the teacup and took a sip. His parched throat felt a little better, but his expression was still terrifyingly dark. Eunuch Xiao heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. He hurriedly called for the servants to clean up. The palace servants lowered their heads and did not dare to look at the person sitting in the seat of honor. Soon, the imperial study was restored to its original state and quickly retreated. The Sichuan Emperor's gaze seemed to fall on the table in front of him, but his thoughts were not there. He thought of the military intelligence reported by the guard today, and his gaze grew colder. Xiao Su is really going to rebel. Your Majesty, is there any misunderstanding?" Eunuch Xiao asked in a low voice. The Sichuan Emperor slammed the teacup on the table and said angrily, "Misunderstanding? He raised an army of 100,000 without permission. How can this be a misunderstanding? If I had not forced him to take action, this army of 100,000 would have attacked the capital and put a knife to my neck." Eunuch Xiao immediately shut up. His Majesty was now in a fit of anger. It was better for him not to add fuel to the fire. Otherwise, the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. "I have indeed raised an ingrate. If I had known that he would do this, I would have let him die on the battlefield." After the Sichuan Emperor finished speaking, he took a deep breath and raised his hand to cover his eyes to calm himself down. Eunuch Xiao saw that the Sichuan Emperor was restless and could not help but sigh. Commandery Prince Chonghe was right. If His Majesty had not forced him, His Royal Highness would not have taken this step. His Majesty could not blame others. However, this person was still His Majesty. Eunuch Xiao could not help but say, "Your Majesty, you don't have to worry about the 100,000 soldiers under the King of England's command. Our Sichuan army has hundreds of thousands of soldiers." The Sichuan Emperor took his hand away and looked coldly at Eunuch Xiao. "The King of England has just handed over the command of the army. Li Weiyuan had time to reorganize the army. They used to obey the King of England's command. Now, the King of England's command. 3 armies. Then what should we do? Li Weiyuan has 100,000 soldiers under his command. Together with the 100,000 soldiers that I have trained for Ranner, 200,000 soldiers are more than enough. I'm afraid that his 100,000 soldiers are all elite soldiers. The Sichuan emperor twitched the corner of his mouth. He did not like his son at all, but it had to be said that it was difficult to find someone in Sichuan who could match his ability to lead troops. Qiao Ji, pass down the order. Let Li Weiyuan hand over the 100,000 soldiers under his command to the fourth prince and let him take over the army. Yes, this old servant will send someone to pass down the order. His Majesty planned to let the 200,000 soldiers hold back the King of England. It would be best if they could get rid of him. If they could not, then General Li would take over with the army. In a few moments, His Majesty had made a decision. When eunuch Xiao returned, the Sichuan emperor seemed to be talking to him, but also seemed to be talking to himself. Ranner is too soft-hearted. He admires his eldest brother, but since the incident with Chu Qingyan, he has slowly walked to the opposite side of the King of England. Now, I will give him a push and let him know that if he wants to sit on the throne, he has to step on the corpses of his loved ones. He has to walk step by step. The ruler of a country does not need kindness and brotherhood. Only a rational person who is not affected by emotions can sit on the throne for a long time. Just like him, he could break his promise to his childhood sweetheart in order to become the crown prince. He could use his wife in order to sit on the throne. As long as it was for the country, he could sacrifice anything. There was nothing that he could not do. When eunuch Qiao heard this, he lowered his head even more. These words were not for a servant like him to listen to. What His Majesty said today would definitely go in one ear and out the other. The Sichuan emperor looked at the person beside him and shook his head. This old man was like this. He knew what to listen to and what not to listen to. That was why he could live with him for so long. However, he found that there were not many people around him who could talk to him. Now, he was really going to be a loner. But what did it matter? At least he guarded the Sichuan Empire and did what he wanted to do. Now, what he wanted to do most was to completely eradicate the person who would destroy his empire. He stood up and slowly walked to the windowsill. He stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes looked past the layers of undulating eaves and looked at the dusk sky. His eyes were gloomy. He had waited for this day for too long. The night gradually darkened. Wang Po looked at the person sitting in the yard and was slightly worried. She turned and went into the room to get a cloak. Walking behind him, she said with concern, "Lord, the wind is rising. The dew here is heavy. Do you want to go in and rest?" Hearing this, Xiao Ho turned and took the cloak from Wang Po's hands. He smiled warmly. "I'm not sleepy. If you're tired, go rest. Don't pay attention to me." "Lord, you have stayed for many days. This place is not as comfortable as the Wang Fu. Also, your wounds have not healed and you should receive better care." Wang Po looked lovingly and worriedly at him. If Lord does not dislike this old servant is willing to enter the Fu with the old man to serve you. Xiao Ho showed a grateful smile. "When you and Uncle Wang want to enter the Fu, I will have someone come to receive you." As for me, the smile in his eyes faded. He turned to look at the grape trellis in the yard and smiled lightly. "I want to see the grapes ripen. I promised her that when the grapes ripen, I will bring her here. Now that she is not here, I will watch for her so that I can talk to her later." Now, he was her eyes to see all the mountains and rivers for her. Wang Po's eyes became wet and she almost cried. But Lord did not cry. How could she rub salt on his wounds? At this time, Lin Jiangdong hurried over. She found an excuse to leave. When she turned back to look at the thinning figure, Wang Po could not take it anymore. She leaned on her husband's shoulder and cried silently. "You can't stop smiling. Did something good happen?" Xiao Ho raised his eyebrows and looked at his confidant in front of him. Lin Jiangdong nodded and said with a smile, "Lord, this news could not be better for us. It turns out that the King of England has an army in his hands. The number is not small, at least 100,000 people. Today, this one received news that the King of England has already met up with his subordinates. Those pursuers do not dare to act rashly. Originally, We were worried that His Royal Highness would not have the ability to fight against His Majesty after handing over the command token of the 3 armies. I did not expect him to have a backup plan. It seems that our revenge is just around the corner. Xiao Ho curled his lips into a smile. Now you should know why this king has spent nearly 10 years and still not been able to topple this royal brother, right? Lin Jiangdong nodded heavily. It was not that their lord was too weak, but that His Highness was too strong. He took 1 step and looked at 3 steps. No matter what he did, he had a way out. It was simply too terrifying. Fortunately, they were no longer enemies now. Chapter 1381. Although it was a happy thing to have 1 less strong opponent, the current situation in front of them was still a bit tricky. Lin Jiangdong regained his serious face and reported the rest of the information he had gathered. Lord, we can't be happy too early. His Majesty has sent Xiao Ran to lead 200,000 soldiers to deal with the King of England. As long as they are given some time to reorganize the 3 armies, hundreds of thousands of soldiers will be sent to deal with the King of England. I'm afraid that even if the King of England is brave and skilled in battle, he won't be able to win. Xiao Ho was not anxious at all. He said faintly, "Do you think the 3 armies are so easy to reorganize?" "That's true." Lin Jiangdong nodded. "This period of time is enough. If it still doesn't succeed, then we can only blame ourselves for not being as skilled as them." Xiao Ho chuckled, then continued, "Since there are reinforcements on brother's side, then withdraw our people. This king still needs people here." Lord is right. I heard that many of those who led the 100,000 soldiers were brave soldiers who had followed the King of England through fire and water. Lin Jiangdong agreed. When the King of England broke out of the palace, Lord was worried that he would be outnumbered, so he sent people to protect him secretly. Oh, so to say, the generals who had followed the eldest brother have now given up their official positions to follow him? Yes. Xiao Ho's mouth curled up slightly. He was in a very good mood. He couldn't help but say, "Continue to inquire about the news in the palace. If there is any movement, report it to me." Now, it wasn't just one prince who had rebelled. Even the generals who had made great contributions to Xixian had abandoned the court. Presumably, Father Emperor was so angry that his liver hurt. Hearing Lord mention the palace, Lin Jiangdong remembered something. His Majesty's health has been unwell recently, and the Empress' freedom has been restricted. From now on, the palace is under the control of Consort Yu. The informant reported that there has been a change in the imperial physicians in the imperial hospital. The old imperial physician who used to take His Majesty's pulse has retired. This matter sounded unimportant. Xiao Ho quietly pondered for a while, then raised his eyebrows. He raised his hand to touch his chin, then said with a faint smile, "This king is thinking that imperial father's health is not well. As his son, this king should go into the palace to visit. Lord is such a filial person, he should go to His Majesty to show filial piety." Lin Jiangdong followed his words, but his smile was slightly cold. Xiao Ho put down his hand and stood, a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Teacher is right. This king should go and see what imperial father, who has been attacked by the recent events, is like now. He was being tortured by hatred. How could the culprit who had caused all this be let off scot-free? He couldn't wait to see what kind of face the person who had been harmed by his own stubbornness would have. Go arrange it. This king will go into the palace tomorrow. The summer wind rustled through the forest. Flocks of mountain birds occasionally flapped their wings and took flight from the lush foliage. In the boundless plains, soldiers in black armor stood tall like pine trees. They were neatly arranged in rows and were in the middle of training. Their hums were deafening. Not far away, there was a military camp made of tents. In the largest tent, there were soldiers in armor standing or sitting. At this time, they were looking seriously at the person sitting on the main seat. If the officials who had experienced any of the wars in the past 10 years were here, they would find that the famous generals of Xixian were all gathered here. Just by sitting there silently, the might of tigers and wolves on their bodies made one's legs tremble involuntarily. They had risked their lives for Sichuan, fought against foreign forces, and stabilized the country. Even if they had outstanding military achievements, they did not show a trace of complacency. They were still in awe of the battle uniform they wore. This was the army of tigers and wolves led by Xiao Su. They were not arrogant in victory or discouraged in defeat. They had once caused the surrounding countries to tremble in fear, and no one dared to challenge their bottom line. At this time, Xiao Su had his back to the crowd. He held a pen in one hand and drew on the map. Right now, we are in this position. The army led by Xiao Ran is 120 li away from us in Li City. Right now, they are not a threat to us. You should lead the soldiers to rest for a few days. We can make plans later. Gao Hao could not sit still when he heard this. Your Highness, at this time, we should strike first to gain the initiative. Master's arrangements are naturally reasonable. Moreover, you have been rushing here day and night from Fu Li Mountain, so the soldiers must be very tired. Only after resting will they have the energy to fight. If you want to take revenge for Master, there is plenty of time. Hualing raised his hand to calm Gao Hao and analyzed the situation with him. When everyone heard this, they felt that it was very reasonable. From Fu Li Mountain range to here, it would normally take at least a month, but they did not dare delay. They were afraid that something would happen to the general, so they cut the time in half. When they met up with the general, although their spirits were high, their bodies were already exhausted. All right, you can go and make the arrangements. After Xiao Su gave the order, the generals did not say anything else. They really did need a good rest, so they cupped their hands and left in an orderly manner. Only the cavalry masters of Xiao Lai cavalry were left in the tent. At this time, Ethereal quickly walked in from outside and said to the person at the head, "Master, Water Spirit is back." Everyone revealed happy expressions. Even Xiao Su, who had been tense the entire time, revealed a faint smile. Let her come in and report. As soon as he said this, Water Spirit was helped in by someone. Water Spirit, you're injured? Hualing was shocked. Water Spirit helplessly nodded. It's just an arrow in my left leg. But it's fine, it's already been pulled out. It's just that it's a bit inconvenient for me to walk. Everyone let out a sigh of relief. However, when Water Spirit turned to look at the person at the head, she waved away the subordinate supporting her and knelt down to beg for forgiveness. Master, this subordinate did not follow the plan to receive the young princess. At the time, someone attacked this subordinate's group and this subordinate was forced to leave to avoid the pursuers. After that, this subordinate lost contact with everyone. This subordinate did not do a good job. Please punish this subordinate, Master. In the Xiao Lai cavalry's code of conduct, no matter what the reason was for their failure, they would not find excuses for themselves. If they did a good job, they did a good job. If they did not do a good job, they did not do a good job. It was because of this strict discipline that the Xiao Lai cavalry became the organization that everyone feared. As soon as Shui Ling returned, she inquired about the whereabouts of the little princess and learned that she had yet to return, so when she faced her master, she felt extremely guilty and couldn't wait to take her sword and slit her throat as an apology. However, when he saw Shui Ling come in alone, Xiao Su's eagerness to see her suddenly cooled. Although he was very disappointed, he knew that Water Spirit had done her best. Leaving the capital this time, it could be said that there were dangers and surprises that exceeded his expectations. Chapter 1382. Xiao Su raised his hand to have someone help Water Spirit up. His expression did not change as he said in a deep voice, Ben Wang knows the situation is critical, so Ben Wang does not blame you. Now is the time to use people. Later, go down and let Ethereal examine your injuries. With just a few words, he reduced his subordinate's guilt and reignited her fighting spirit. This was Xiao Su's way of using people. He was clear about rewards and punishments and knew how to move people's emotions. Water Spirit nodded heavily. Not only did Master not blame her for not finding the little princess, he even assured her that she would not be left behind in the following mission. This made Water Spirit very moved. Without another word, she left with Ethereal. Xiao Su swept his eyes over the people in the tent and waved his hand. You guys can leave as well. He needed to calm down. There was still no news of the little fellow that he was worried about. Although he was anxious, there were still the soldiers he followed here. He could not let his emotions affect them. Turin and Hualing looked at their master, who was holding his forehead in loneliness. As long as the little princess was not found, their master would not be able to calm down. It was their fault for losing the little princess. Now that there was no news of her whereabouts, they did not dare to say anything else to add to their master's worries. They tacitly retreated. At this time, on the other side of the mountain, in a corner of the dense forest, a few snow-white figures were jumping around. They held wooden branches or firewood in their mouths and handed them to a handsome young man. Then they began to search around. When they passed by a huge eagle, they glared at it in disdain. It did not do anything and still wanted to eat good food. Shameless. That eagle did not pay attention to them at all. It lowered its head and combed its feathers as if its feathers were the softest outer layer in the world. Feeling the other party's disregard, the snow-white figures almost fought with it. Fortunately, the youth stopped them in time. He stuffed a large piece of roasted meat into their mouths to stop them. The youth was Chu Qingyan. She was speechless as she looked at them, who did not see eye to eye with each other. They would only be united when they were eating or teaching the enemy a lesson. But seeing them rolling around in front of her so happily, she felt incomparably at ease. It would be great if Big Ice Cube was here. She didn't need to do anything. He could make these beasts obedient and not cause trouble. After eating and drinking to its heart's content, Little C shook its wings and flew into the sky. Ever since it started following its master, it had developed a good living habit, which was to digest food after meals. Chu Qingyan was also used to it going out for a stroll. At this time, the most obedient glutinous rice ball rolled on the ground and then rolled into her arms. Stroking its furry head, she couldn't help but ask, "Glutinous rice ball, do you miss His Highness?" Glutinous rice ball whimpered in her arms. Mistress must be thinking of His Highness. In fact, it didn't just miss His Highness. It also missed Old Master and Old Madam. It didn't know when it would be able to see them again. As if they felt their master's longing, Bai Yutong and Shuawa Cake also stopped fooling around and came over. They squatted in front of her and shook their heads, licking her fingers and face from time to time, trying to make her happy. These black eyes were filled with concern and comfort for her, making her very touched. She couldn't help but reach out to hug them. "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me at this time, for protecting me, for comforting me, for giving me someone to rely on, and for giving me the motivation to move forward." As if they knew what their master was thinking, the three of them happily licked her face, smearing her face with saliva. At this moment, a black dot swooped down from the sunset sky, and it kept calling out to him. At first, Chu Qingyan thought that Little C was jealous of these beasts acting spoiled and cute in her arms. But when Little C landed, it didn't even bother to look at Bai Yutong and the others. It kept calling out to her towards the south. Only then did she realize that something was wrong. "What's over there?" Chu Qingyan walked in front of Little C and asked in a low voice. Little C barked a few times, and then took out the fluorite cloud from her neck. Chu Qingyan looked down at the fluorite cloud hanging on her chest. This was given to her by the Big Ice Cube on her birthday when she was 10 years old. These days, every time she missed the Big Ice Cube, she would take it out to have a look. At this time, she had a flash of inspiration and stared at Little C in front of her in disbelief. "You found His Highness' trace?" Little C arrogantly glanced at the three beasts next to it, then nodded proudly. She was pleasantly surprised. She hugged Little C's neck and jumped up and down in place. Little C helplessly rolled its eyes, messing up its beautiful feathers. But seeing that its master was so happy, it didn't care about it this time. So with Little C leading the way, Chu Qingyan took Bai Yutong and the others and walked quickly through the forest in the afterglow of the setting sun. When she thought that the Big Ice Cube was on the other side of the mountain, she couldn't suppress her excitement. She raised her qinggong to the extreme and couldn't help but want to see him as soon as possible. The few that were following her sensed her emotions and ran even faster. That feeling of being reunited with her family was too wonderful. Standing at the top of the mountain, it was already time for the sun to set and the moon to rise. When she saw the tents that stretched to the end of the field, Chu Qingyan's eyes filled with tears. She had finally found them. She didn't care about her excitement as she brought the beasts with an unstoppable momentum and flew down from the top of the mountain. Thus, the Earth Spirit and Fire Spirit who were patrolling with their troops saw a few snow-white figures rushing towards them from afar at lightning speed. What made them unable to shift their gazes away was that the person in red at the very front was like a firework approaching them at a rapid speed. They stared in that direction like wooden chickens, completely forgetting to react. "Two sirs, there is an unknown person heading in our direction. Should we shoot?" A small general discovered the enemy in front of them and immediately ran over to report. As soon as his voice fell, 2 chestnuts fell off the small general's head. Hua Ling fiercely said, "Shoot what? That is Master's treasure. Can you afford to take responsibility?" Turin nodded, "That's right." At this time, Glutinous Rice Ball and the others smelled a familiar scent and brought their master in front of Hua Ling and Turin. "Long time no see, where is your master?" "Master is in the stream in front of us," Hua Ling unconsciously replied. The person who just stepped on the ground turned and quickly flew in the direction Hua Ling pointed. Her ink-black hair spun in the air as she elegantly left. "Bathing." When Hua Ling finished speaking, there was only air left in front of them. "Two sirs, the general is bathing. Should we send someone to stop that little brother?" That small general received another 2 chestnuts. Hua Ling took back his hand. "Stop what? That is Master's treasure. Can you afford to take responsibility?" Turin continued to nod in agreement. "That's right." Thus, after receiving the order, the soldiers could only watch as the woman, 3 wolves, and 1 eagle charged into the barracks unimpeded. Then, they could only watch as they disappeared before their eyes once again. Chapter 1383. Along the way, Chu Qingyan clenched her fists tightly. Her heart was thumping furiously. She was about to see the person she was thinking about. How could she not be excited? Little Master must want to give him a pleasant surprise. The others beside her seemed to know what she was thinking. They didn't make a sound as they escorted her forward. There was a stack of clothes on the shore and there was a faint sound of water splashing coming from the stream. At this moment, Xiao Su was standing in the middle of the stream. His upper body was naked, and he was raising his hand to scrub his chest. In the past few days, he hadn't had a good bath. Now that the situation was still stable, he had time to clean up. In fact, because he missed her too much, he needed cold water to calm down. The leaves rustled and he heard a small sound coming from the air. He frowned. When he was emptying his mind, it seemed like something had broken in. What kind of guards were Hua Ling and the others? His sharp eyes looked around the forest and finally locked onto a direction. There was a leaf floating on the water's surface that reached his waist. Xiao Su casually pinched it between his 2 fingers and was about to make a move after questioning it. A slender figure appeared in his field of vision. Under the shadows of the trees, he couldn't see her face clearly, but that familiar feeling that made his blood boil made him stunned. At the same time, 3 snow wolves that were as tall as a person's waist emerged from the grass and stood beside the person. The annoying and familiar cry of the eagle sounded in his ears again. He suddenly opened his eyes wide and stared in disbelief at the figure that suddenly appeared. He couldn't take his eyes off of her. He didn't know when the leaf in his hand had been taken away by the stream. At this moment, he was afraid that everything was just a dream or an illusion. He didn't dare move. He was afraid that if he moved, that person would disappear. Chu Qingyan stood under the tree's shadow, not daring to take a step forward. She came in a hurry and didn't know that her big ice cube was bathing here. If she knew earlier, she wouldn't have run over. But she had been standing here for a while, so why was he still standing in the water without moving? Could it be that he didn't recognize her? Although she was wearing men's clothes, Big Ice Cube had seen her in this disguise before. It was impossible for him to not recognize her. Then why didn't he react at all? Previously, due to her shyness, she didn't dare to look at him. Now that she had waited for a while, the blush on her face faded slightly, and she mustered up the courage to look at him. Under the moonlight, in the sparkling stream, there was a tall and handsome man. His hair was as black as ink, and his facial features were deep and handsome. He had a natural charm, and a drop of water dripped from his chin, along his neck, and to his chest. His abs were even sexier than a bodybuilder's. Under the moonlight, his entire body was like an undulating snowy mountain, making people want to nosebleed. Her face flushed red from the careless glance just now, and she was once again in a hubbub. She originally wanted to return to the tent to wait for him after greeting him, but now she didn't want to do that anymore. With a tap of her foot, she flew towards him like an arrow. Xiao Su was still breathing softly, not daring to approach her. He didn't dare to open his eyes, afraid that she would disappear in an instant. However, he didn't expect that she would suddenly move. Like a ray of red light, she bloomed brilliantly in front of his eyes. Damn it, she seemed to have used too much strength. She originally wanted to jump in front of him, but now she threw herself onto him. The corner of her mouth twitched. Forget it, let's just make the best of it. Xiao Su didn't know the fierce struggle in her heart. He instinctively opened his arms and caught her. Because of the inertia, he took 2 steps back before he could stand still. The soft and real feeling in his arms impacted his heart. So he wasn't dreaming, the little fellow had really returned to his side. However, before his thoughts could fade, the person in his arms raised her head and held his face without saying a word, sending her fragrant lips forward. The warm and soft lips carried a fragrance that attacked his nerve endings. The wet and slippery little tongue pushed open his teeth, and then rampaged in his domain with an impatience that couldn't be ignored. He was only absent-minded for a moment. Although he was surprised by the little fellow's actions, how could he let the beauty down when she was so proactive? He tightened his hands and pulled her into his arms. Kissing her lips, he took the initiative and attacked fiercely. The situation immediately became one-sided. Chu Qingyan didn't care at all. Instead, she did her best to cooperate with him, and their lips and tongues danced together. The two of them had a tacit understanding and couldn't restrain their emotions. She reached out and hugged his neck. Because of her height, she raised her head to bear his attack. Her neck began to ache, and she couldn't help but borrow the buoyancy of the water to spread her legs and hang them around his waist. For a moment, she seemed to feel that his movements were sluggish, but a moment later, he held her but with one hand. His heat penetrated through the soaked thin clothes. She didn't have time to be startled. The deep kiss swept through like a storm, as if he wanted to tear her apart and eat her up, not giving her the slightest bit of time to breathe. The gurgling, flowing stream, with a gentle touch, passed by the two of them, shaking the light all over their bodies. Between heaven and earth, it formed a scene of its own. However, the two of them, who were tightly pressed against each other, as if they were exquisitely carved by the heavens, were even more dazzling and beautiful than this natural scenery. It was picturesque, and nothing could be more beautiful. The world was quiet, and there were only the two of them. It was as if just like this, they could kiss until the end of time. If it wasn't for the fact that she couldn't breathe, Xiao Su wouldn't have reluctantly left her lips. Her snow-white skin was covered with a layer of rouge, and her red lips were even more vibrant. His eyes couldn't help but become even darker. She opened her eyes. The person she missed day and night was right in front of her. She couldn't help but raise her head and caress his face. Her eyes curved as she spoke of her longing. "Big Ice Cube, I missed you so much." In a lover's world, every word, every action, was a catalyst for emotions. Xiao Su hugged her even tighter. He lowered his head and pressed against her forehead. He said hoarsely, "I missed you too." In the end, he added in a low and hoarse voice, "I missed you very much." She couldn't help but curl her lips. The joy and pride in her heart were like overflowing syrup, and she couldn't stop it. Although the weather was still very hot, they were in the mountains after all. Afraid of the cold, Xiao Su buried his head in her shoulder and said, "Let's go ashore first." She didn't mind and responded. Then, just as he took a step forward, his body instantly stiffened. However, he quickly adjusted himself and continued to walk towards the shore. Chu Qingyan's face was already red as she buried herself in his embrace. When the two of them were dancing just now, she did not notice the changes in his body. However, Now that the two of them were in such silence, how could he hide the changes in his body from her? The two of them were drenched from head to toe. Their summer clothes were thin, and they clung tightly to each other, as if there was no obstruction. She raised her head and looked into the pair of fiery black eyes that were restraining themselves. Her heart was moved, and the thought that flashed through her mind just now became even more firm. Chapter 1384. Why didn't you make a sound when I was standing under the tree for so long? She remembered this matter and couldn't help but poke him and ask in dissatisfaction, causing her to be bitten twice by mosquitoes. Xiao Su laughed softly. I thought I saw an illusion again, it's my fault. Although he said it with a smile, she could clearly feel his deep longing for her from the joy in his words. She couldn't help but hug him and scold him softly with a choked voice. Idiot, I forgive you. Xiao Su smiled and didn't say anything, but his arms hugged her even tighter. When they reached the shore, he jumped up and landed on the ground, putting her down. He raised his hand and the clean clothes on the ground flew to him. With a flip of his hand, the clothes were draped over her body. The mountain wind is cold. Chu Qingyan looked down and saw that her entire body was wrapped tightly by him. In contrast, he was wet and standing in front of her with only a pair of trousers. She felt that it was funny and warm. However, she smiled mischievously and reached out to hug him. Her cheek rubbed against his chest and she smiled coquettishly at him. Big Ice Cube, why are you so hot? He didn't think that the little fellow would suddenly come close to him, especially after those words came out of her cherry mouth. He raised his hands to hold her shoulders and lightly pecked her lips, suppressing his desire to crush her into his body. He only lightly touched her lips and left, for fear that he wouldn't be able to control himself and take her. Be good, we have to go back. Going back was just an excuse. The most important thing was to calm the fire in his body. She could hear the pain he was suppressing and knew that he didn't want to touch her before they got married because he respected her. She was very touched by his intentions, but she was born in the modern era and only knew that since she had already decided that the other party would be her life partner, then there was no difference whether it was a step earlier or a step later. Xiao Su didn't think that the moment he finished speaking, the person in front of him would come even closer. Her expression was tender and beautiful, every frown and smile, and her eyes were full of hidden feelings. Big Ice Cube, I want to ask for a gift in advance. She gently blinked at him. What? He didn't understand. His entire being was captivated by her enchanting gaze. Just as he was in a daze, she had already thrown herself at him with open arms. This time, the distance was very close. He was caught off guard and was thrown onto the grassy ground. She pressed down on his body, and the loose robe that had been wrapped around them earlier spread out, covering both of them. With the cushioning effect of the grass, he did not feel any pain from the fall. His entire focus was on the person in front of him. He panted lightly, then rubbed her head lovingly. Stop fooling around. If you want to punish me, you can punish me when we get back. He thought that she was making trouble for him because he didn't recognize her before. Chu Qingyan snorted softly. Her hands wandered around his body. She sighed at how good his skin was and how lucky she was. Ian, he called out to her anxiously, his voice hoarse and heavy. Her hands were grabbed by him, but Chu Qingyan did not show any dissatisfaction. Instead, she raised her delicate little face and declared to him in a tone that brooked no argument, Tonight, I'm going to make you mine. When have I not? He blurted out, but his eyes widened in shock, as if he just understood what she meant. However, at this moment, the person who had finished her declaration lowered her head and bit down on his collarbone, leaving an ambiguous bite mark and a pool of sparkling saliva. The tingling sensation could not be compared to the injuries he had received on the battlefield, but it made his thoughts stop for Sui. Ian, the person who had just bitten him, looked at his astonished gaze with sparkling eyes. She pretended to be fierce and said to him, Big Ice Cube, if you continue to dawdle, this lady will make it so that you won't be able to eat for the rest of your life. As she said that, she angrily bit down on his lips. What a blockhead! Actually, her face was already burning hot. This was the first time in her life that she had forced herself on someone, so she was a bit embarrassed. But the road ahead was treacherous and she didn't know what unknown dangers would appear. She didn't want to think about the future, she wanted to live in the present. Drink in the morning and enjoy the love in the morning. She didn't want to leave any regrets in the future. Xiao Su tilted his head and avoided her sharp teeth. He looked back at her with a heavy gaze. When she was about to bite him again, his thin lips parted slightly. "You've thought it through?" If she didn't understand him, she would have been deceived by his appearance. She looked into the little flame in his eyes and her hands seemed to be able to move again. She raised her hand to hug his neck and suddenly said with a smile, "Since your highness has asked so sincerely, then this concubine will seriously invite you again. With the sky as the blanket and the earth as the bed, how about it?" "All right, since the princess consort has invited, how can this prince dare to not accept?" His gentle and seductive voice brushed past her ear, causing her whole body to tremble and her face to blush to the roots of her ears. However, she was very satisfied with his enlightenment. Just as she was about to proceed to the next step, he suddenly sat up from the ground and pulled her into his embrace. Then, he stood up and quickly rushed into the depths of the forest. In a few breaths, Xiao Su was already sitting on a thick tree trunk that was as wide as an arm, and she was sitting in his embrace. She looked around and was a bit surprised. "How did you find such an excellent place?" It seemed to be the size of a small bed. However, her chest suddenly felt cold and the clothes on her body disappeared. She blinked and forgot to react. Xiao Su waved his hand and the two's clothes hung on the tree branches. The large robes fell down like a bed curtain, completely covering the two of them. Although this ancient tree was lush, the two of them were at the top, and the outside of the forest was heavily guarded. Without his orders, no one dared to step in. However, he only wanted her to belong to him. Even the birds in the mountains did not want them to take a second look at her. The leaves were dense and only the moonlight shone in. But when the clothes were taken off, the light was replaced by the stars on her neck. Xiao Su reached out to take the fluorite cloud and casually placed it in a hole to the side. In this small world, it was as bright as day. His gaze swept across her milk-like skin and the sparks in his inky eyes gradually ignited. "I didn't think it would be used at this time." After he finished speaking, he leaned over and covered her. His long hand scooped her into his embrace and there was almost no gap between them. She wanted to say something, but he had already blocked all her words. The light shone through the high and low covering clothes and reflected their overlapping figures on top of each other, moving up and down ambiguously. He could faintly hear a soft and charming voice protesting with dissatisfaction, "I want to be on top." Then there were all kinds of indescribable sounds and images. Under the tall tree, by Yutang, snowflake cake, and glutinous rice ball each occupied a position. Their eyes were like torches and they were vigilant, guarding their master. And in the sky, Xiao Hai narrowed his eyes and looked around, not letting any suspicious creatures go. Tonight, they wouldn't let anyone or anything disturb their master and his highness. Chapter 1385. When he gave her the stars, he only wanted to light up her future path. He didn't expect that it would light up their future together. At that time, he never thought that his life with this little fellow would be intertwined, and he didn't want to separate. Just like when he wanted to send her away, his side was like a tiger's den. He never thought that he would have the time and ability to protect her until she reached marriageable age. It was just that she was much braver than he thought, and much more determined. Once she grabbed his hand, she was never willing to let go. As for his shaky thoughts, they were completely crushed by her sincere and dependent eyes. Now, he was very glad that he didn't push her away at that time. He let her peacefully grow in his world, and in the end, she took over his entire heart. At this time, he touched her face, sucked on her bright red lips, and gave the final blow to the two of them. The delicate person finally couldn't take it anymore and fainted. He lay on top of her for a moment, and the air was filled with an ambiguous atmosphere. He hooked his lips, got up, and kissed her lips. Then he wrapped the clean clothes on the tree trunk around her body. Finally, he took her into his arms, carefully protecting her as if he was holding a rare treasure. Actually, she was the apple of his eye. When they were entangled together, he had already checked her body. She wasn't injured, so his hanging heart finally relaxed. They hadn't seen each other for nearly half a month, so he didn't have time to take a good look at her appearance. Now, he used the light of the fluorite cloud to look at her face, greedily using his eyes to trace every inch of her skin. No wonder the ancients said that an inch of lovesickness leads to an inch of ash. Before she returned to him, he only felt the torment in his heart. But at this moment, the person he missed was in his arms, quiet and obedient like a kitten. He felt that he suddenly had the entire world from nothing. This feeling was strange and made him greedy. Imperial Father was wrong. It wasn't that he felt satisfied when he sat on the world, but when he hugged the person he loved, he felt that his life was truly complete. When his fingertips touched that smooth jade skin, he almost couldn't control himself. His emotions were like a tide, and he couldn't help but cover the delicate petals again. Chu Qingyan was awakened by a kiss. To be more precise, she was awakened by holding it in. She opened her eyes and was a little confused. She didn't know what day it was. However, she didn't know that her half-asleep and half-awake appearance was an irresistible and fatal attraction to a man who had just had his first taste. And Xiao Su did the same. Thus, as soon as she woke up, she saw a handsome face magnified in front of her eyes, and then took away her breath in minutes. The previous round had already consumed more than half of her strength, and now she had no strength to push him away. She could only use her remaining strength to wrap her arms around his neck, and then let him turn her over and over like this. Sure enough, the evils brought upon themselves were the hardest to bear. She just wanted him to truly become her man, and she didn't want to have any regrets in life. However, she had underestimated his battle prowess. How could a person who could single-handedly fight against dozens of fierce cavalry without taking a breath for an entire morning be satisfied with just a meal of meat? A person who had tasted the word love for the first time would want more. Once he got entangled with her, he wasn't willing to stop. Perhaps it was because the two of them had been separated for too long, and too many things had happened during this time, but everything had already spiraled out of control. Facing his subordinates, he could only suppress his inner emotions. Now, the person in front of him made him completely relaxed. There were thousands of words in his heart, but they were all put into action. The more strength he used to squeeze her into his body, the more intense his love was, and the more affectionate the words he wanted to say. At this time, silence spoke louder than words. Chu Qingyan was floating in the vast sea. Although he didn't say anything, and she didn't ask, the moment they met each other's eyes, she already knew how much pain he was suppressing in his heart. That was why she allowed him to do whatever he wanted when he couldn't stop himself from doing what he wanted. But in the end, she couldn't help but want to beg for mercy. He stretched out his arm and pulled her into his embrace. Leaning close to her ear, he smiled naughtily. Who was the one who said she wanted to be on top? How about this king satisfy you? She immediately retreated. What kind of joke was this? Just last time, she had almost broken her waist. It wasn't that she was too weak, but that this one in her family was too fierce. She couldn't endure it. However, the sky and earth spun. When she opened her eyes again, she wanted to cry but had no tears. This concubine can't do it. Before she finished speaking, she couldn't help but let out a series of low gasps. She didn't even have time to complain in her heart because her body and mind were completely occupied by him. Her back was still covered with the clothes he had put on before. At this time, it hung down, covering their naked bodies, one sitting and one lying down. In front of her eyes were bewitching eyes, looking at her passionately. It was like a ship's lantern on the sea, swaying in the wind. At this time, she tried her best to concentrate, but in the end, she could only follow the swaying black hair and fall into the undulating waves. Until the very end, she felt sweat dripping down. A sentence flashed through her mind. No wonder old friends used the phrase, the joy of fish and water, to describe this kind of love. His blood was boiling and his body was full of energy, but he had been restraining his movements. The little fellow was like a delicate flower that needed to be carefully protected and treated with gentleness. A night of fragrant wind messing up the branches, 5 slender fingers reaching the ends of her hair. Low eyebrows and gentle smiles, little sparks burning in his eyes. Light and slow twirling, gentle and soft, charming eyes like silk flowers. A garden full of colors, but not as delicate as a wife's cheeks. The night wind blew, the forest insects chirped, the mountain streams flowed, the moonlight shrouding the beautiful scenery. The entire mountain gradually fell into a deep sleep under the hazy moonlight. Only the wolf that had been hungry for a long time, wanting to taste the marrow again and again, not knowing how to be satisfied. From the moon on the treetops to the dawn, she didn't want to recall what she had experienced. At this moment, she just wanted to have a good sleep. After exercising for a whole night, her body was sticky. Xiao Su carried her and jumped into the stream to wash her carefully. During the process, he couldn't help but have sex with her once more. After that, he simply cleaned himself up and then returned to the temporary small cloth house. At this time, Chu Qingyan didn't even have the strength to roll her eyes at him. After eating for so long, he should have eaten enough. Why was he still staring at her so hungrily? Xiao Su gently took her into his arms and patted her back to coax her to sleep. She had been on the road for days, so she must be tired. He also tossed her around for an entire night. He also knew that he had asked too much, but he didn't regret it. He only felt that their hearts had never been so close. But tomorrow morning he had to admit his mistake. The last time he made the little fellow cry. For the next benefit, his attitude must be sincere. Chu Qingyan didn't know that the person in front of her was so two-faced and deceitful. After she fell asleep, he also leaned against the tree trunk and closed his eyes to rest. But his hand holding her tightly did not loosen. If there was a first time, there would be a second time. Since he had already started eating, he didn't need to be afraid that he wouldn't be able to eat it again. For this undefeated god of war, tonight's night was more beautiful than any night he had spent before. It was simply incomparably beautiful. Chapter 1386. Achoo! Hua Ling gave a heavy sneeze and woke up with a start. His neck felt uncomfortable when he moved, so he couldn't help reaching out to rub his shoulders and neck. Then he gave a yawn and looked at the forest not far away, asking the person beside him with a puzzled expression. Master and the little princess have been by the stream for an entire night. Why haven't they come out yet? Turin bit a blade of grass and was currently looking at the sunrise on the horizon with narrowed eyes. The bright red gradually dyed the white clouds in the sky, making people feel awe towards this world. Hearing Hua Ling's words, he casually replied, "It wasn't easy for the two of them to reunite, so they naturally have a lot to talk about. Why are you worrying so much for? If you have the time, why don't you go and check on the soldiers' training?" Hua Ling gave a soft snort, saying it like he was the only one curious. "Then what are you doing here with me? Aren't you the same as me?" Turin lightly looked at him. "I'm watching the sunrise." "Only a ghost would believe you. When did this person understand such poetic things?" Hua Ling gave a snort. Before Turin's chestnut fell, he suddenly opened his eyes wide and pointed forward for Turin to see. "Isn't that Bai Yutong? What is it doing?" Turin looked in the direction Hua Ling was pointing and saw Bai Yutong sniffing here and there. Then it looked in a direction and ran over while snorting. The two of them looked at each other. Wasn't that the tent their master was living in? While they were feeling suspicious, Bai Yutong had already come out of the tent with a stack of clothes on its head. At this time, Bai Yutong seemed to feel their gazes on it. It turned its head to look at the two of them and gave a whimper. Then it quickly went back the way it came. At this time, the small general ran over and said while panting, "Lord's tent has been stolen. Should this general chase after the thief?" There were witnesses and evidence, so the two sirs wouldn't reward him with chestnuts, right? However, the two sirs ignored him. Hua Ling rubbed his chin and said with a bit of surprise, "Just now, I seem to have seen the grievance in Bai Yutong's eyes, as if it was complaining. This is the first time I've seen it like this. It's really fresh. Could it be that my eyes are playing tricks on me?" "No, you are not alone," Turin said calmly. As a result, The general was once again left out in the cold. The morning dew in the mountain forest was heavy, and the wind blowing was also cold. Chu Qingyan woke up to a gust of morning wind, but she did not feel cold, because someone was already helping her dress. Her whole body was sore and weak, and she was too lazy to move. She just watched in a half-awake state as the person in front of her seriously helped her put on her clothes and, seriously, took advantage of her. She didn't even have the strength to roll her eyes, but she couldn't stop the flush on her face. After slowly helping her put on her belt, Xiao Su quickly put on his clothes. At this time, Chu Qingyan looked down at her own clothes. She had brought them from her bag, but she remembered that his clothes had already been ruined by them last night. How did he still have clothes? Seeing that her gaze had been on him for a long time, Xiao Su quickly understood. He tidied up his clothes and hugged her again. Only then did he explain to her. "I'll have Bai Yutong bring them over from the tent." Xiao Su was never polite to the followers who sent him around. At the same time, her sharp eyes picked up a snow-white wolf fur from his shoulder. Then she blew it off and curled her lips at him. "Why didn't you have your people bring them over?" "I don't want people to disturb our two-people world," he honestly replied. Hearing this, she couldn't help laughing. She raised her hand to poke his chest. When she touched his clothes, she couldn't help missing the elastic abs from last night. After not seeing each other for a few days, your mouth seems to be smeared with honey. You really know how to talk. Do you want to try it? He asked in a low voice by her ear. She immediately became alert and wanted to shake her head, but the other side had already pressed down, not giving her any chance to refute. So the previous question was just a formality. He was already determined to do it. In the end, when the two of them separated, their clothes were already messed up. The sun is about to rise and you're still messing around? If your subordinates see this, your tall and mighty image will definitely be smashed to pieces. She blushed as she hurriedly tidied up her clothes. During this time, she angrily glared at him a few times. Xiao Su rubbed his nose. He had already seen what he needed to see last night. This little fellow was really too shy. Last night, Ian, you were the one who took the initiative first. He wrapped his arms around her body and leaned his head against her forehead as he complained in a low voice. Her cheeks turned warm as she pulled out his hand from under her clothes. She gave a soft cough and looked at him. Who was the one who didn't let go in the end? Although she was the one who took the initiative, there was a large difference between men and women. After she took the first step, she was counterattacked by him. Actually, he was a wolf in sheep's clothing. His mouth said no, 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 but his body was very honest. As if he could feel her silent criticism, he gave a low laugh. His voice echoed in her ears, making her unable to resist it at all. The princess consort is too delicious, this king can't eat his fill. These words successfully turned her from a pink peach to a red braised crayfish. She gave a shy smile as she gave a soft snort. I think it's the Lord's appetite that is too big and this concubine can't feed his fill. After saying this, she suddenly felt like their topic was so dirty. Could it be that after taking that step, she had thrown away her modesty? When he was about to kiss her again, she immediately reached out a finger to stop him. Who knew if he would continue to ask for more? When the little fellow puffed out her cheeks and leaned into his embrace, complaining that her entire body was sore and she couldn't move, Xiao Su knew that he had been a bit too harsh. But this was the first time in his life and the person he doted on the most, so no matter how much he restrained himself, he couldn't completely control himself. After all, when the feelings were deep, he couldn't control himself. He touched her face and promised not to touch her again, letting her rest for a while. She had been drowsy just now, but now that she was really going to sleep, she couldn't fall asleep. She couldn't help grabbing his hand and intertwining her fingers with his. Not only were his fingers slender, the joints were clearly defined, and they were also white. The tips of his fingers were a bit pink, as if they were decorated with flower petals. It was so beautiful that it made people jealous. It was simply infuriating to compare oneself to others. She couldn't help wanting to pull her fingers out. However, the fingers that allowed her to play around suddenly tightened. Their 10 fingers intertwined, not letting her pull away. Feeling the tender affection, she couldn't help curling her lips as he played with her fingers. Pressing her cheek against his chest, she remembered that under the illumination of the fluorite cloud last night, she saw a few more scars on his body. She couldn't help but ask softly, "Big Ice Cube, tell me, how did you get through this period of time? How did you get through it without me?" And then, cough cough, at everyone's request, I specially added 2 more bowls of sugar. Please kindly accept it. Chapter 1387. Chu Qingyan's mind immediately became alert as she listened to Big Ice Cube's narration of what had happened in the Imperial Palace. She listened to him with a cold expression before speaking again. "So this time, your Imperial father really spared no effort in trying to kill you." When she said this, her entire body trembled uncontrollably. It was hard for her to imagine what it would be like for a father to force his own son to drink poison. It was also hard for her to understand how it felt to be forced to die by one's own father. However, she could feel the fear and panic in her heart. She hugged his waist tightly, feeling both angry and fearful. Xiao Su did not continue speaking. He hugged her trembling body back and said in a half-joking, half-pitiful tone, "What are you afraid of? Aren't I standing in front of you perfectly fine? Besides, I'm fine as the person involved." She sniffled and said in a low voice, "No, In the end, she could not help but cry. Hearing her suppressed sobs, Xiao Su panicked and pulled her out of his embrace in a fluster. Looking at her watery eyes that could not stop crying, he felt like his heart was about to shatter. It was even worse than when he heard that Imperial Father wanted him to drink the poisoned wine. "Alright, don't cry." He clumsily raised his hand to wipe the tears from her face. It was said that women were made of water. Indeed, it was true. Those tears were like a stream that could not be wiped away. Xiao Su's heart ached. In the end, he kissed her eyes until she choked and stopped crying. "Sorry, I just thought about what I would do if you drank that cup of poison. I can't live without you." She hung her head and kept rubbing her eyes. She was like a kitten that had been abandoned by the roadside, helpless and lonely. After he heard this, his heart almost melted. He reached out to pull her back into his embrace and comforted her softly. "Silly, I didn't drink it, did I? I'm still here, alive and well in front of you. I will never leave you again, and no one will separate us. If Duke Chong he did not appear to stop your Imperial father, what would you do?" She clutched his sleeve tightly and her voice was tight. Her eyes were filled with tears, as if she would continue to cry if he said that he didn't like her. Even though this matter had already passed and he was no longer under his father's control, the little fellow was still nervously imagining countless possibilities, afraid that he would leave him in one of them. When he saw the fear in her eyes, he instantly understood what she was afraid of. She was afraid of every possibility of losing him. Even if it was already in the past, she didn't dare to imagine every what if. Because he loved her so deeply that he couldn't accept any possibility. He couldn't afford to gamble on every if. Not every Chu Qingyan could meet such a big block of ice. Not every Xiao Su had the chance to meet such a little guy. Because they loved each other, they cared about each other and understood each other's inner thoughts. Xiao Su couldn't help but soften his expression and soften his voice. He told her that if Duke Chong he did not appear, how would he escape from this situation? He would never drink the poisoned wine and leave her. "I originally wanted to use the secret of the Fuli mountain range to keep Imperial Father in suspense so that he wouldn't kill me. However, the appearance of the second-rank prince saved me from my predicament. Now that I've broken out of the palace and joined up with the army, I think that if Imperial Father saw the situation today, he would have taken my life no matter what." After hearing his next move, her emotions gradually calmed down. She only sniffed and tried to smile at him, but in the end, she laughed until tears came out. She buried her head in his chest and said hoarsely, "Big block of ice, I'm so glad that you're still fine. In the future, erase that person from your life. All right." He tightened his arms and buried his head in her hair. "My parents will treat you as their son. Moreover, you still have me. You are not a child without parents. You still have a group of people who love you. You won't be lonely. I know that you've always been by my side. The two of them quietly hugged each other as they sat on a branch, admiring the first rays of light from the earth. When the sun leapt over the horizon, the brilliant light enveloped the two of them. In the circle of light, the two of them smiled at each other. Like butterflies breaking out of their cocoons, they were reborn. And under the tree, Xiao and the snowflake cake quietly squatted on the ground. They also looked at the eastern horizon, bathed in the golden light. They were motionless like statues, dignified without being angry. After being lovey-dovey for an entire night and an entire morning, under Chu Qingyan's strong request, Xiao Su reluctantly brought her to the ground. However, as soon as her feet touched the ground, her legs couldn't help but go weak. Fortunately, she held on to the person beside her, otherwise, she would have fallen like a frog. He helped her put on a veil hat, covering her stunning appearance. His little fellow could not be spied on by others. It's all your fault. She glared at him in annoyance. If it wasn't for him not knowing how to control himself, how could she not even have the strength to stand? She had just steadied herself when she fell into Xiao Su's embrace. She cried out in alarm, "We can't do this." If she appeared in front of his soldiers like this, how embarrassing would that be? Didn't you just say that it was my fault? I, Xiao Su, will take responsibility for my own actions, so now I'm atoning for my mistakes. He carried her and walked towards the outside of the forest. Hey, let me down. You're a general, carrying a lady like this, where's the propriety? She was really afraid that his dignified image would be ruined because of her. In ancient times, women were not allowed to follow the army. But her family's big ice block, carrying her into the camp openly like this, she didn't care, but she was afraid that this would affect the soldiers' morale. Moreover, it was at this crucial moment. Whether or not it would cause a commotion, she had to eliminate this possibility. Big Ice Block had always been used to doing things his own way. He could ignore it, but she couldn't not consider it for him. You are my woman, my wife for life. He said resolutely. This was his person, so what was there to be afraid of others saying? But the person in his embrace struggled fiercely. His heart ached that she was so tired last night, so he could only give in. But no matter what, he had to carry her to the edge of the forest before he was willing to let her go. Knowing that this was already the biggest concession he could make, she readily agreed. When they reached the edge of the forest, under her insistence, he finally put her down. You're just thinking too much. He shook his head and helplessly rubbed her face in a pampering manner. She knew that he would always compromise for her, but she was very happy that he could take care of her emotions. She couldn't help but stand on her tiptoes and place a kiss on his face, a reward for being obedient today. Then when a flame appeared in his eyes and he reached out to grab her, she nimbly dodged and brought the four of them behind him. He heard her call out in surprise and joy, Turin, Fire Spirit, Water Spirit, Ethereal, Wood Spirit, Gene Exon, you're all here. Chapter 1388. His subordinates were all waiting here. Xiao Su's eyes couldn't help but twitch. As expected, the world of two people was quieter. In the end, he took a deep breath before turning around to face everyone. When Hua Ling and the others saw their master turn around, they immediately felt a cold aura wrap around their backs. If it was any other time, they would have run away, but little Wang Fei had finally come back. They would rather have their master's cold face than say a few words to little Wang Fei. Xiao Su coldly swept his eyes over them, but they had the little fellow as their backing, so they weren't afraid of him. He couldn't help but feel helpless and amused. The scene was very lively right now, with people talking one after another. There was no place for Xiao Su to step in at all. However, he didn't speak much in front of his subordinates, so he was reduced to staring at Bai Yutang on the side. It was a pity that Bai Yutang was still thinking about how he had threatened her to be treated as a thief when she went to get her clothes, so she pointed the condom at him. And Xiao Hai took the chance to laugh at him for having such a day. So while that side was chatting passionately, this side was as silent as ice. Chu Qingyan saw out of the corner of her eyes that Big Ice Cube was fighting a battle of wits and bravery with the others. She felt it was interesting. At this time, Turin suddenly knelt down and she jumped in fright. "Little Wang Fei, it's been hard on you. It's this subordinate's fault for not being able to protect you, causing you to suffer so much." When Turin finished speaking, before she could help him up, Water Spirit knelt down again. "Little Wang Fei, this subordinate is also wrong. Please punish this subordinate for not being able to help you." Ethereal also knelt down. His reason was that he had been separated in front of the prison and hadn't been able to stay by her side to protect her. Then Hualing, Mu Ling, and even Jean Exin knelt down. Their reasons were even more varied. What was it that they didn't take good care of their master and caused him to be injured? Looking at the people kneeling on the ground, Chu Qingyan felt helpless. She couldn't help turning to look at the person beside her. Why did they have to apologize to her even for something that hurt Big Ice Cube? Xiao Su took a step back and continued to tease them. It was obvious that he didn't want to get involved and wanted her to solve it herself. He did not punish Turin and Water Spirit because he wanted her to deal with them herself when she came back. This was an opportunity he created for her to establish her authority. Now that the situation was different, he needed her to have the same authority as him so that she could be protected when he was not around. Forget it, this person wants to be a hands-off shopkeeper. Chu Qingyan shook her head in her heart, and then helped the people kneeling on the ground up one by one. "The most important thing is that you can stand in front of me alive." She walked up to Turin, Ethereal, and Water Spirit and said sincerely, "Thank goodness you're safe and sound. Otherwise, I wouldn't know how to explain it to your master. I can't let you get hurt or even lose your lives because of me." The inner demon that had been haunting him for the past few days was finally gone. Su Jian was right. If there were flowers to be plucked, they should be plucked. If there were no flowers, they would only be broken branches. Even if they had been in the fierce cavalry for a long time and their temperaments had been tempered to iron, when they met Chu Qingyan's gentle gaze, they couldn't help but turn soft. In the past, they were in awe of her because of their master, but now there was an indescribable feeling added to it. It could be said that it was brotherly love. After everyone exchanged greetings, Xiao Su walked back to her side and lightly said, "Are you all very free?" Hua Ling and the others trembled when they heard this and shook their heads in unison. This subordinate wants to go inspect the camp. This subordinate wants to discuss the nearby terrain with the generals. This subordinate just remembered that there are some herbs that haven't been classified yet. In an instant, everyone scattered. "Big Ice Cube, you scared everyone away." Chu Qingyan put down the veil on her hat again and raised her eyebrows as she spoke to him. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. "They're just feeling guilty." She couldn't help shaking her head with a smile. "Let's go, I'll show you around my camp." Xiao Su pulled her hand and walked forward. She had told him not to be too intimate with her in public, but no matter what she said, he didn't listen. It seemed that ever since they met again after their separation, Big Ice Cube couldn't wait to take her with him all the time. Perhaps he was afraid of worrying about her safety during this period of time, so she could only empathize with him and go along with his wishes. Jean Exen followed behind the two of them. He felt like he was the same as Xiao Hai and the others, being completely ignored by his master. Sure enough, that girl Xining was right. As long as His Highness was there, his master's eyes would accept him. There was no other person or matter. Along the way, Chu Qingyan was stared at by the soldiers passing by. It seemed like everyone was trying to guess her identity, but because of the presence of the person beside her, they only dared to sneak glances at her. Then they would wait until they were out of sight before whispering to each other. "It's all your fault." She gave a snort. "Why is it my fault again?" This time he was a bit confused. "I'm already wearing men's clothes and you're still holding on to me. People will think you're gay." When she said this, she successfully felt his body stiffen and she couldn't help shaking her head. Although the soldiers would find out her identity sooner or later, right now they didn't know she was a woman, so it was normal for them to think in that direction. "I really should put a line on your body, you are this king's woman," Xiao Su softly said. She couldn't help smiling. So the big ice cube also had such a cute side, it really was rare. He lifted the curtain and entered the tent. The furnishings inside were clearly visible to him. There was a bed, a desk, a tea table, and chairs. Although it was simple, this was how armies were supposed to be in battle, so it was already pretty good to have it. I'll have someone prepare some food for you. Eat a bit first, I have something I need your help with later. After pouring a cup of water for her, Xiao Su directly spoke. Chu Qingyan took the cup and looked at him when she heard this. It can't be. I just got here, and you already have something for me to do? Even enslaving people isn't like this. No wonder Turin and the others are so afraid of you. You must have exploited them like this. Hearing her pretend to complain, Xiao Su pinched her face in amusement. I'm asking you to help me interrogate someone so that you can familiarize yourself with the current situation as soon as possible. Otherwise, when you go blind, don't blame me for not letting you participate in anything. Alright, I'm just joking with you. I'm not afraid of trouble, I'm just afraid that you won't let me participate. She snatched her pitiful face from his hand, then asked with bright eyes, What is it? Tell me what's going on first. Facing her coquettish behavior, he couldn't do anything about it. He pulled her to sit down, then said, This matter is related to Lani. She's third Imperial Brothers person. What? Chu Qingyan's eyes opened wide. Before, Hong Yi, Qing Yi, and Huang Yi were all other people's informants. Now that there was another one, she couldn't help pursing her lips as she said, Why do you always bring back a bunch of people with different backgrounds? Xiao Su was helpless. That's why I'm asking the princess consort to help this king clean up the troops and see if there are any hidden spies. If this is this minister's first task after taking office, then this minister's concubine will not refuse. She cupped her hands in response. Xiao Su couldn't help but smile at her mischievous appearance. Chapter 1389. The woman in front of him was radiant and charming. For Xiao Su, who had just tasted meat, it was like he was addicted to it. There was no one else around. Xiao Su's mind moved, and his body moved faster than his mind. He reached out and pulled the person who was looking at the tent, unaware, into his arms. The beauty's soft figure ignited a fire in his eyes. His hands tightened around her waist, and he was about to bite her red lips. Chu Qingyan didn't expect him to do this. She was about to push him away because there were soldiers guarding outside, but when she met his passionate eyes, her heart softened. She changed her hand from his chest to his neck and closed her eyes shyly. The little fellow's obedience made the heat in his eyes rise to another level. However, when their lips were about to touch, a loud voice sounded from outside the tent. Son-in-law, son-in-law, father heard that Kai Kai is back. Where is she? Where is she? As soon as he finished speaking, the curtain was lifted and Chu Machen's father bounced into the tent. He seemed to have seen the pink air in the tent suddenly vanish. He patted his head, thinking that his eyes might be playing tricks on him. Thinking of his daughter, he immediately looked up. The two of them had their backs to him and were quite a distance away. Just as he was about to call them, the two of them turned around at the same time. One of them was extremely cold and cheerless, while the other called out to him with a sweet smile, "Father, your daughter is back." If Father Chu was more astute, he would have noticed the unnatural blush on their faces. Father Chu's eyes lit up, and he immediately ran over. "My poor Kai Kai, father missed you so much." "Daughter missed you too." Chu Qingyan held her father's hand and responded with tears in her eyes. Who knew that the smile on Father Chu's face would disappear, and he would pout so hard that a wine bottle could be hung from his mouth. "Why, if you missed me, you wouldn't have stayed with son-in-law for so long. You would have come to find me long ago." On the way here, he heard Black Impermanence say that Kai Kai came back last night. How despicable. He only found out now that Kai Kai didn't love him anymore. When Xiao Su heard this, his bad mood from being interrupted suddenly calmed down. Father stomped his feet and threw a tantrum as soon as he came back. What should he do? Usually it was Big Ice Cube who helped to adjust the temperature. Chu Qingyan immediately asked for his help, but she didn't expect him to stand aside and watch coldly with his arms crossed. He didn't look like he was going to help at all, and he even looked like he was on par with her father. 3 black lines instantly appeared on her forehead. Why were these two people becoming more and more backward as they lived? At this moment, Chu Qingyan's mother appeared and saved the day. Chu Qingyan rushed to her savior and said, "Mother, you're here. Kai misses you so much." Mrs. Chu looked her up and down lovingly. Seeing that she was fine, she put her hand on her head and rubbed it gently. "It's good that you're fine. Being safe is a blessing." Xiao Su and Mr. Chu looked at each other. They had both lost. Xining quickly served breakfast, and the family talked about what they had seen and heard in the past few days while eating. Xiao Su didn't show up last night, and he was delayed in the morning, so he quickly finished breakfast and left Hualing to Chu Qingyan. Then he went out to train the soldiers. After hearing about what happened to her daughter, Mrs. Chu couldn't help but wipe her tears. "Thank God you came back safely. If something happened to you, what would I do?" When Mr. Chu saw his wife crying, he immediately glared at his daughter in front of him. "It's all your fault." Chu Qingyan could only nod and admit her mistake. After eating and comforting the 2 old children, Chu Qingyan called Xining and Jin Xian in front of her and asked about what happened on the way. Then, she asked Xining to send her parents back, and ordered Hualing to bring Lan Yi in. Since Big Ice Cube said so, she would solve this matter first. Knowing that her daughter had something to do, Mrs. Chu persuaded her husband to leave. Mr. Chu was a little unhappy that his daughter had been taken away by someone else as soon as she came back, but Dan Nyang told him to look at the big picture, so he reluctantly left with Xining. But before he left, he hesitated and said, Lan Yi is very obedient. She even made candy for father to eat. She's not a bad person. If she did something wrong, don't hit her too hard. Don't break her." Chu Qingyan was thinking about this and didn't expect her father to say this. It was rare for her father to plead for someone. While she was lost in thought, her father and mother had already left. Forget it, she would talk about it when she saw them. Soon, Lan Yi was brought in. Although she was wearing a simple blue dress without any decorations, her temperament was otherworldly. Her facial features were dignified and beautiful. When she walked in, it was as if she was a beautiful woman walking out of the smoke. She always knew that the 7 maids were all beauties with different temperaments. Hong Yi, Cheng Yi and Huang Yi were all beauties. It was just that she didn't have much contact with them, especially the ones after LV. Because Lan Yi was only in charge of the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone, she rarely appeared, so she didn't have a deep impression of her. But now that she saw her, she would never forget such an outstanding beauty. Lan Yi greets the princess consort. Lan Yi stood in the center and bowed with a smile. Her etiquette was perfect and there was no problem. Chu Qingyan knew that Lan Yi had saved her father and the others, which was why they were able to leave the city safely. Thus, Chu Qingyan did not want to make things difficult for her. She went straight to the point and asked, "Lan Yi, you are a smart person. You should know why I called you here, right?" Lan Yi calmly nodded and then knelt down. She respectfully answered, "This servant knows. This servant is not an orphan. This servant is one of Prince Yi's people. Many years ago, this servant was sent to His Royal Highness on a mission. Although I am in the King of England's manor, I am actually working for Prince Yi." It was rare to see someone so cooperative. Chu Qingyan and Hualing looked at each other and secretly nodded. Then they turned to look at the person kneeling on the ground. "As far as I know, Prince Yi has always been against His Highness. Why didn't you expose him at the city gate and save everyone instead?" This was something that she and Big Ice Cube couldn't understand. He was clearly an enemy, so why did he help them in the end? Lan Yi revealed an expression other than a smile when she heard this. She blankly shook her head. "This servant doesn't know." Not long after the princess consort entered the palace, this servant received an order from my master to protect the people in the King of England's manor. No matter what the cost, even if he had to use his secret forces, he wouldn't hesitate. When these words came out, everyone present was shocked. Chu Qingyan was even more confused. The person who used to chase after you suddenly changed his personality and didn't hit you when you were down. Instead, he helped you when you were down. She really couldn't understand what this Xiao Ho was thinking. At this time, Lan Yi took out a letter from her chest. This was given to this servant by my master. He told me that if His Highness asked, I should give this letter to His Highness. His Highness will understand after reading the letter. At this time, Huoling had already taken the letter and passed it to Chu Qingyan. Chapter 1390. When Xiao Su received the news from Huoling and rushed back, he saw little high and glutinous rice ball sitting at the tea table as soon as he opened the curtain. When the little fellow wasn't here, this was just a temporary place for him to rest. He never thought that this cold and cheerless tent would have a warm side to it. Perhaps, a place with a loved one was home. Even if he had to wander in the future, he could still call the world his home as long as she was by his side. He couldn't help slowing down his steps as he walked in. When he came in, Chu Qingyan had already noticed him. She pointed at the table, indicating for him to look at the letter. Xiao Su didn't think too much as he walked over. When he picked it up, he found that it was still sealed. He couldn't help looking at the person who was currently tickling glutinous rice ball, and his lips couldn't help revealing a gentle smile. She was always so considerate. She never touched anything that others gave him, especially when it came to secrets. She would always let him look over it first. You don't need to be so sensible, what's mine is yours. He raised his hand to touch her face. I know, because you'll always let me see it in the end. She slyly grinned at him. Xiao Su chuckled and then opened the envelope. He took out the letter and carefully read it. She saw Xiao Su's mood change from relaxed to frowning and then to disappointment before he finally closed the letter. Although she had been playing with glutinous rice ball, Chu Qingyan still paid close attention to him. It was rare to see his mood change so complicated, so she couldn't help moving over. What did Xiao Ho write that made you so emotional? Take a look for yourself. She took the letter and immediately opened it to read. Her expression changed a lot, and it was even more obvious than Xiao Su's. Her lips twitched as she said in disbelief, So, he was only targeting you because he mistakenly thought that your mother was the one who framed his mother's family, so he has a grudge with you? Now the truth is out. Your father worked with the right prime minister to frame the Luo family, causing Luo Fei to die with hatred. That's right. Xiao Su rubbed his eyes. Previously, he had thought that his third brother had targeted him because of his identity as the eldest son of the first prince. He had never thought that it was because of this reason. If they had talked things out earlier, they would not have fought for so long. Chu Qingyan quickly accepted this matter, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Your imperial father is indeed an incapable ruler who can't distinguish between loyalty and treachery. He can even abandon his own son, and can even humiliate and kill his own old officials. Is there anything in this world that he won't do? Kidnapping a woman from a good family, what difference is there between him and a bandit? After this incident, Xiao Su was even more disappointed in his father. He shook his head. It seems that after so many years, this isn't the only thing he has done. What he did to you is unforgivable. Chu Qingyan took a deep breath, and then calmed down. She asked, What do you think of Prince Yi's proposal? The two of them had no doubts about Xiao Ho's words. During this escape, without his secret help, it would have been very difficult for them to smoothly meet up with the army. Xiao Su recalled the conversation with Xiao Ho before they left the palace. Xiao Ho had personally promised that he would not attack him again. Xiao Su was even more convinced of Xiao Ho's words. What do you think? Xiao Su collected his thoughts and did not answer. Instead, he threw the question back to her. His eyes sparkled with encouragement. Chu Qingyan nodded without hesitation. Cooperation? Cooperation, of course. He is inside, and you are outside. With his help, we will have a smoother time. Otherwise, with Xiao Ran and the 3 armies in his hands, even if we are celestial soldiers and generals, it will be difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. The little fellow's words were exactly what he wanted. He raised his hand and pinched her face. Okay, we will do as you say. Soon, Lan Yi was brought in again. Seeing the relaxed expressions of the two, Lan Yi was puzzled, but she immediately knelt down and saluted. Lan Yi, you should be able to contact Prince Yi's people. Tell them that His Highness has agreed to everything he said. If there is anything in the future, they can contact him at any time. Chu Qingyan said directly. Lan Yi's face lit up. Yes, I will do as you say. But soon she bowed down and apologized. Lan Yi has concealed her identity for more than 10 years. During this period, Lan Yi has delivered a lot of information for Prince. Lan Yi knows that she is guilty. Please punish me, Your Highness and Princess Consort. Chu Qingyan looked at the person beside her with some embarrassment. However, her big ice cube was focused on playing with her fingers. He did not want to care at all. She rolled her eyes helplessly. After thinking for a while, she said, You have no choice. Plus, you saved my father and mother before. It can be considered as atonement for your crimes. In the future, we will be allies with your master. We will not pursue the past. If you work hard in the future, we will not treat you unfairly. These words made Lan Yi happy. She kowtowed 3 times. Thank you, Princess Consort, for your magnanimity. Lan Yi has nothing to repay you with. I will do my best. Okay. After Lan Yi and Hua Ling left to do their work, Chu Qingyan suddenly reached out and grabbed Jiang Yi's hand. She looked worried and upset as she said, Big Ice Cube, if we really fall out with your Majesty Father in the future, you might become a traitor recorded in the history books. Will you be sad? Xiao Su chuckled. Am I the kind of person who fishes for fame in your eyes? She quickly shook her head. That's not what I meant. Xiao Su reached out and put her on his knees. He lightly pecked her lips and smiled disapprovingly. Just now, he was just teasing her. I am the ruler, the country, and the people, but I was almost separated from my wife and my family. Right now, I just want to live for myself and ask that person if he regrets it. I have fought on the battlefield for more than 10 years. The winner is king and the loser is a bandit. I understand this. If I am not as good as others, I will admit it. If I win, what do you think the history books will say? Her eyes instantly lit up. The history books were written by the winners. She did not need to worry at all. Her lips curled into a smile like the sun. All right, I will protect you as you move forward. He had elite soldiers and she had 10,000 beasts. With the two of them working together, there would be a day when they would return to the capital and make the Sichuan emperor repent for what he had done all these years. Xiao ran far away, received the news from his scouts. He almost crushed the letter in his hand. Your Highness, what happened? As the deputy general, Yanshi saw that his expression was not right and could not help but ask. Chu Qingyan has returned to Xiao Su's side. The person he was worried about still abandoned him without looking back. Xiao Ran gritted his teeth. He felt that his heart was empty and there was nothing to fill it. She is just a woman. She is not worthy of your Highness' anger. Lu Wenfeng did not know about the dispute between them and said indifferently. Yanshi shook his head. General Lu's words are different. This Chu Qingyan is the Chu Qingyan who accompanied the King of England to fight the southern blue back to his nest. Moreover, she has a very strong herd of beasts in her hands. It is very disadvantageous for us. We cannot let her help the King of England. Otherwise, this battle will be very difficult to fight. Xiao Ran said coldly. He did not look as lost as before. Yanshi thought for a moment. His eyes flashed. I have a plan. Chapter 1391. Let's hear it. Xiao Ran's interest was immediately piqued and he looked at Yanshi closely. Yanshi nodded and did not beat around the bush. Chu Qingyan had previously disguised herself as a man and disguised herself as Chu Yan. Although not many people knew about this, as long as word got out, she would not be able to use this identity to gain a foothold in Xiao Su's army. After all, women are not allowed to appear in the army, much less lead soldiers into battle. This method had been supported by everyone. Go on. Xiao Ran's face was calm. Encouraged, Yanshi continued, a few days ago, we have people who have infiltrated their army. Now we can play a role. The fastest thing in the world is rumors. I believe that Chu Qingyan won't be able to stay in the army for long. Xiao Ran nodded and a ruthless smile appeared on his lips. Do as you say. Yen Shi immediately accepted the order and left. You all can leave too. Xiao Ran waved his hand and everyone left the tent. Xiao Ran stood in front of the lantern. The hazy light of the lantern made illusions appear in front of his eyes. The beautiful woman tilted her head and smiled at him, but when he looked closely, there was no one in front of him. He reached out and grabbed the corner of the table. His clear eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of shadow, dark and difficult to distinguish. Qingyan, I will prove to you that I am stronger than my brother and can give you a better future. I will prove it. The swaying light made his handsome figure even more slender, but it made people feel gloomy for no reason. In the imperial palace of the capital city. Your Majesty, Prince Yi requests an audience. Eunuch Xiao stood beside the dragon bed and said respectfully to Sichuan Emperor. Sichuan Emperor's hand holding the scroll paused. He was surprised. Prince Yi is recuperating recently. How can he have the energy to come to the imperial palace? I think your Majesty is not feeling well. Prince Yi is worried about you and came to visit. Eunuch Xiao said with a smile. Let him in. Sichuan Emperor nodded. At this moment, Xiao Ho was standing in front of the palace door, his gaze falling on the imperial garden not far away. Spring was the season when all living things came back to life, while summer was the season when all living things flourished. It was already close to the end of summer. Although they were not in the garden, looking from afar, the trees were verdant and the flowers were flourishing. It was a beautiful sight. It had been a long time since he had been here, and it had been a long time since he had the leisure to admire the surrounding scenery. Now that he had a clear target for his revenge, his heart was even calmer. Maybe it was because of Little Rascal's words. Good and evil will eventually be rewarded. It's not that they won't be rewarded, it's just that the time hasn't come yet. Planting in spring and harvesting in autumn, he hoped that by autumn everything would be settled and he would be able to meet up with Little Rascal without any worries. At this moment he heard the sound of footsteps. The disappointment on his face was replaced by a faint, harmless smile. He turned around and looked at Eunuch Xiao, who was walking towards him. Lord, sorry to keep you waiting. Please follow this old servant. Eunuch Xiao politely raised his hand in invitation. Xiao Ho smiled and nodded, then followed Eunuch Xiao slowly towards the palace door. My father has always been in good health. Why did he suddenly fall ill? Xiao Ho asked worriedly. Eunuch Xiao sighed softly and answered truthfully, Lord is right. His Majesty's illness was too sudden. Perhaps it was because the court has not been peaceful recently. Memorials flew into the imperial study like snowflakes. His Majesty has not had a good rest for 3 consecutive days. With the heavy workload of government affairs and his worries, His Majesty is not made of iron. He fell ill from exhaustion. Xiao Ho nodded. This prince does not walk around the palace often. In the future, I will have to trouble you to take care of my father. Eunuch Xiao hurriedly said, Lord, you are too serious. It is this old servant's duty to take care of His Majesty. I will do my best. As they spoke, the two had passed through the antechamber and arrived at the inner palace where Sichuan Emperor was recuperating. Seeing the person lying on the dragon bed, Xiao Ho immediately bowed. I pay my respects to Imperial Father. No need to be so polite. You are still injured. Chao Ji, bring a chair for Prince. Sichuan Emperor put down the scroll and ordered. Thank you, Imperial Father. After sitting down, Xiao Ho went straight to the point. I heard that Imperial Father was ill. I was worried and came to the palace to visit. How is Imperial Father feeling now? I am tired. I will be fine after a few days of rest. Sichuan Emperor's concubines gave birth to at least a dozen princes, but only 4 survived and grew up. Xiao Su was born to the Empress, Xiao Yao was born to Consort Wan, Xiao Ho was born to Consort Luo, and Xiao Ran was born to Consort Yu. However, among these 4 sons, he was most concerned about Xiao Su and Xiao Ran. The former was guarded against, and the latter was doted on. As for the 2 in the middle, he rarely paid attention to them. At most, he provided Xiao Ho, who had been ill since childhood, with countless precious herbs. Sichuan had a vast territory and abundant resources, so he did not lack these herbs. On the surface, this son of his was very obedient and diligent in recuperating. He never participated in any struggles, so he was able to live well under his nose. However, in the recent days, this son's performance in front of civil and military officials was beyond his expectations. Why did that appear in the morning court? The West Xian Emperor took the teacup from eunuch Xiao, but he was not in a hurry to drink it. He looked at eunuch Xiao with a smile, as if they were father and son conversing normally, but there was a sharp light in his eyes. Xiao Ho knew that his performance that day had aroused his father's suspicions. After all, he was a paranoid person. Otherwise, he would not have been on guard against his eldest brother for so many years. Thus, he had already thought of a plan to deal with him. A look of grief and indignation appeared on his face. His hands clenched into fists, and his sickly pale face flushed red. However, this was due to anger. This son received news that imperial father wanted to seek justice for this son. This son was afraid that those evildoers would not be brought to justice, so this son stood out to identify them. The marriage was Jing's own decision, and I, her husband, was also chosen by her. Although I did not like non-Song women at first, after interacting with her, I gradually became attracted to her naivety. He was so direct that Sichuan Emperor was momentarily at a loss for words. Imperial father, you also know that Ai's life has been like a pool of stagnant water. Only with Jing's arrival did Ai's life have a trace of vitality. I originally thought that this was a gift from the heavens, allowing Ai to live out the rest of his life without regrets. Who knew that those people would be so vicious, actually making a move against Ai? And because of Ai, Jing also died. Xiao Ho was only acting at first, but as he spoke, he did not realize that his true feelings were revealed. His eyes were slightly red, and his face was filled with unwillingness. How could I let the culprits go unpunished? So he stood up and knelt on the ground. Prostrating himself, he mournfully said, I implore Imperial Father to seek justice for Ai. Otherwise, even if I died, I would not be able to rest in peace. The West Xian Emperor stared in shock at his son kneeling before him. That determined face and sorrowful eyes reminded him of the Luofei of the past. Chapter 1392. His probing gaze turned into recollection, as if he was recalling the past. At the end of the busy street, Luofei stood under the lanterns, looking around with her beautiful eyes, making people forget her beauty. Sichuan Emperor returned to his senses and looked at his son, whom he had never paid attention to. Now, he discovered that he had grown up, with outstanding charm, and was even more outstanding than Li. However, his body was too weak. When he was young, the imperial physician had said that he would not live past the age of 20, but he had survived. However, he was afraid that he would not be able to live past the age of 30. Thinking of this, Sichuan Emperor hid the trace of doubt in his heart. He sighed softly and said, I didn't expect that there would be such an infatuated person in our imperial family. Forget it. Zhen will give you an explanation. Hearing that he had given up on probing him, Xiao Ho revealed a mocking smile without leaving a trace, and thanked him verbally. After saying such a long speech, Xiao Ho couldn't help coughing. Sichuan Emperor couldn't stand it and had eunuch Xiao help him up. You came to visit the sick, but you are even weaker than Zhen, who is sick. Xiao Ho laughed at himself. I am already on the verge of death. I will be lucky if I can live a day. Imperial Father is still strong and healthy. You will definitely live a long life. Nonsense. You will live a peaceful life. Don't say such discouraging words. Sichuan Emperor reprimanded him, but seeing him like this, he felt a little sour in his heart. Although he rarely looked at his son, he was still his flesh and blood. Xiao Ho glanced at the pity on his father's face and couldn't help but sneer in his heart. He was afraid that his father didn't feel sorry for his son, but for himself. After so many years, he only had 4 sons. When he died, there would only be 3 left. For the imperial family, this was the generation with the least children. Imperial Father, you don't have to worry. This son is just going down to serve Imperial Mother in advance. She passed away early, and this son was unable to fulfill his filial duties in front of her. I feel very guilty, but I can make up for it in the future. When Xiao Ho mentioned Lufei, Sichuan Emperor's face changed slightly, but he quickly hid it. When Xiao Ho said this, he stared at Sichuan Emperor. Sure enough, he found some clues on that face that was good at hiding his emotions. His gaze instantly turned cold, and then it quickly melted away. He lowered his head and no longer looked at Sichuan Emperor. You are a filial child. Sichuan Emperor said somewhat perfunctorily. Afterwards, Xiao Ho no longer mentioned the topic of Lu. The father and son chatted for a while before Xiao Ho got up and excused himself. After Xiao Ho left the palace, Eunuch Xiao saw the West Xian Emperor sitting there silently. He couldn't help but ask, "What is your Majesty thinking about?" Just now, I've mentioned Lu. I was wondering how much he knew about what happened in the past. He knew that he had acted secretly in the past. Those who knew the inside story had either been killed by him or taken in by him for his own use. However, there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall. It wouldn't be strange if Xiao Ho knew about it. Eunuch Xiao couldn't wait to slap his own mouth. The more he asked, the more mistakes he made. But since he had already asked, he could only bite the bullet and answer. His Royal Highness Prince Yi was not born yet. When Lufei passed away, he was only a 6-year-old child. He shouldn't know about it. In the past 20 years, His Royal Highness Prince Yi didn't pay attention to the outside world. He wholeheartedly recuperated. I think your Majesty is overthinking. Eunuch Chao's words eased Sichuan Emperor's frown. He remembered his third son, who had just knelt down and begged for Pang Zhijing's life. He didn't hesitate to plead for a woman. How could he have the ability to endure hardships and hide his courage? The West Xian Emperor smiled confidently. You're right. He won't know. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do anything. He's too weak. He doesn't have the decisiveness and boldness that I have. If he really wanted to avenge the Luo family, he wouldn't have to spend much effort to make his son disappear from this world in a moment. Eunuch Xiao wiped his sweat. He didn't dare to listen to these words. As for the sickly prince who had been rejected by the Emperor of Xixin, he was now leaning against the carriage. He no longer looked as sickly as he had in the imperial palace. His eyes were calmly looking at Lin Jiangdong inside the carriage. What did you find out? Lin Jiangdong looked admiringly at his casually leaning but confident master. Lord, you guessed that there was something wrong with His Majesty's illness. You guessed right. Our people found that although there was no problem with the prescription His Majesty took, the medicine that was boiled was not from the ingredients on the prescription. Today, our informants secretly stole some dregs of the medicine. They are in our hands now. When we go back and let the doctors in the manor take a look, we will know what is inside. Xiao Ho wasn't surprised that his guess was confirmed. Looking at Eunuch Chao's expression, he should have found something else. Other than this, what else is there? Lin Jiangdong's usually stern expression showed a strange smile. The person boiling the medicine was sent by Consort Yu. If there really was a problem with the medicine, then Consort Yu would be the first to be implicated. His Majesty probably didn't expect that the one to act against him would be his favored consort. Xiao Ho snorted softly. Empress Liang is under house arrest, and now Imperial concubine Yu has complete control over the inner palace. It is true that eldest Imperial brother has betrayed the Imperial house, but she does not care about Ben Wang and second Imperial brother. It is only a matter of time before Xiao Ran takes the position of Crown Prince. However, the Emperor is strong, and it is not a problem for him to be Emperor for another 10 or 20 years. But she cannot wait. The Fu family is being punished, and they might be executed at any time. She was born in the Imperial house. She was born in the Fu family. That person who had framed the faithful and harmed his mother and family was no longer worthy of him calling him Imperial Father. Jehovah is right. His Majesty is suffering the consequences of his own actions. Lin Jiangdong nodded and said, It is better if the waters become muddier. It is beneficial for Ben Wang to fish in troubled waters. Xiao Ho curled his lips. He could already imagine how chaotic Xixian would be in the near future, and how his good father would be in so much pain that he wished he was dead. Ben Wang has also gained something from this trip. The emperor has already dispelled his suspicions of Ben Wang. In the future, no one will come to monitor us. In the future, you can do whatever you want. However, you have to be careful in everything. Do not leave any evidence behind. After all, he is a suspicious person. The reason he had come to the palace was because he had sensed that the emperor was monitoring him. What he had said in the hall last time, although there was no problem on the surface, it was the most important evidence to exonerate his eldest brother. Therefore, the emperor had become suspicious of him. Many spies had appeared around him. He didn't care about them and just dealt with them in secret. However, he always sought stability in doing things. Therefore, it was better to treat the root of the problem and have the emperor completely let down his guard so that he could carry out his plan. This one understands. This one will restrain the people below. At this time, someone knocked on the carriage. Following that, a letter was handed in. Lin Jiangdong took it and read it. Then he passed it to Jehovah. It was sent by Lan. Xiao Ho slowly curled his lips. Teacher, the day of our revenge is near. Lin Jiangdong naturally knew what news Lan Yi had sent. However, he didn't expect that Jehovah had already guessed what was written in the letter before reading it. He couldn't help but smile from the bottom of his heart. Then this one congratulates Jehovah in advance. Chapter 1393. Xiao Ho opened the letter. It was just as he expected. His Royal Highness is a courageous person. We've opposed him so many times before, but he still believed us without a second word. He truly is an admirable person. Lin Jiangdong took the letter and skimmed through it before sighing with emotion. Those who achieve great things don't bother with trifles. Moreover, his courage and courage have always been stronger than normal people, otherwise he wouldn't have lived until now. Lord is right. Teacher, this prince regrets it. This water can actually be stirred up even more. Xiao Ho leaned against the wall of the carriage with a lazy expression. However, a glint flashed through his eyes and a faint smile hung on his lips. Lord's meaning is? Lin Jiangdong humbly asked for advice. Xiao Ho softly spat out a few words. The Liang family and the Fu family. After dinner, Chu Qingyan sent off her parents who had come over for dinner. Since she had nothing to do, she strolled around the big ice tent to digest her food. Her identity hadn't been made public yet, so it wasn't good for her to walk around outside. Thus, if there was anything she needed, Jean Xian and Su Yi would help her run errands. Bai Yutong had been brought over to play by her father. Xiaohai didn't like staying in the tent, so he brought glutinous rice ball out to play. The only one who accompanied her in the room was Snowflake Cake. Perhaps it was because it hadn't rested for days on the road, but Snowflake Cake had fallen asleep by her feet while yawning. Outside, there was the sound of heavy armor clashing, running, and the sound of the wind. She was surrounded by familiar scents and her heart couldn't help but feel at ease. Just as she was moving the Snowflake Cake to stroke her fur, a black shadow appeared in front of her eyes. Before she could raise her head, her feet felt light and her entire body was pulled into a strong embrace. She quickly calmed down and rubbed against him like a puppy. Then, she raised her head and asked curiously, "Why do you, a person who usually plays with swords and sabers, have the scent of a scholar? It smells so good." "That's because your husband can pick up a sword and hold a book. As for the good smell, it's because iron is in the eye of the beholder." She thinks that everything about this prince is good. Xiao Su chuckled as he placed her on his knees and reached out to pinch her face. She chuckled. Was he indirectly praising her for her intelligence and martial prowess? He didn't expect to hear the big ice cube praise himself like that. "How thick-skinned," she said angrily. Xiao Su smiled and lowered his head to cover her alluring lips, hooking her little tongue out and playing with it. At first, she was afraid that someone would come in and refuse, but she couldn't resist his overbearingness and enthusiasm. In the end, she accepted her fate. Since he didn't care, she had nothing to worry about. She remembered that he was still a bit inexperienced in the past, but men were self-taught in this aspect. After so many times of practice, he had already reached the point of perfection. He could tease her until she turned into a puddle of mud every time. When the two separated while panting, she was still too shy to look at him. She didn't want to see Xiao cake covering its eyes with its paws and peeking at them through a crack. When it saw that she had noticed, it immediately lay down and pretended that it hadn't seen anything. This appearance made her both embarrassed and angry. She couldn't help but push the person on top of her. "It's all your fault. Xiao cake is still young." He let it see such an inappropriate side. She didn't have the face to see little annoyance in the future. Xiao Su looked at the one on the ground pretending to be dead and said seriously, "I was careless just now." She thought that he knew his mistake, but then she heard him say, "I'll remember to avoid them next time." She almost choked on her own saliva when she heard this. This person had become irresistible after last night. His words made her blush and her heart beat faster. He even used such a serious tone to tease her. "What nonsense are you saying?" Her face was red and her heart was irritated. She jumped down from his lap and tidied up the clothes she had torn. Because it was men's clothing, it wasn't as complicated as women's clothing, so it was easier for him to work on it. She couldn't help but immediately tidy it up. Xiao Su didn't stop her. If he wanted, she wouldn't be able to escape at all. He put his elbow on the table and one hand on his chin, admiring his princess consort tidying up in a flurry. "I didn't say anything wrong. After all, 3 of them are male. I won't let them see you again. You can only belong to me." "Look," these sweet words came out of his mouth to coax her. There was no trace of the cold and heartless attitude he had when they first met. But hearing it made her heart burst with joy. What girl didn't like being held in the palm of her beloved's hand? But she didn't forget where they were now. After her bashfulness, she stood in front of him. "Your mouth is full of nonsense." "That's right, where am I sleeping tonight? Why haven't you arranged a room for me yet? Or should I stay in the same place as Xining? When going out, everything should be simple." She wasn't a spoiled girl. She was more like a dandelion. No matter where the wind blew, she could be at ease. So she had the temperament of a great family, the agility of a beast, and the tenacity of grass. And this kind of girl was destined to shine in this world. Xining and Lan Yi are together. Do you want to squeeze in with them? Xiao Su lightly replied. Then should I squeeze in with mother? She didn't care and continued to ask. You're already of marriageable age. If you still sleep with your mother-in-law, won't people laugh at you? Xiao Su lightly continued to reply. This won't do, that won't do. What do you think I should do? She wasn't a person who liked to cause trouble for others. Moreover, the war was imminent, so she had to make the best use of her resources. There was no need to add another tent for her. Looking at her fuming appearance, Xiao Su smiled and pulled her back into his arms. His gaze fell on her beautiful face and his eyes rippled with mirth, but his tone was very serious as he said, in order to not let Wang Fei be laughed at, Ben Wang is willing to offer himself as a pillow and give half of the bed to Wang Fei. What does Wang Fei think? Puff. She finally realized that he had gone in such a big circle just to wait for her. She couldn't help but laugh. Big Ice Block, why are you so sly? Seeing her smile, he lowered his head and gave her a peck. As long as you like it. When did he hear her say that she liked it? But this isn't appropriate. If you keep someone in your tent, it will definitely arouse suspicion. When the time comes, how are you going to explain it to your subordinates? Although she was obsessed with appearances, and the other party was her lord, she was very determined not to be seduced by his beauty. Because she didn't know what identity she was going to use to appear in front of the army. You don't need to care. How could other people dare to say anything about his woman? She shook her head. That won't do. You know that my face is thin. Moreover, what identity do I have to stay in the army? Xiao Su gave a low laugh. I'm afraid that I won't be able to find a woman as thin-faced as I am. These words made her remember how she took the initiative last night, and she couldn't help blushing. This person was too much. Alright, don't worry. Tomorrow, I'll have people send you and father-in-law away to a safe place. It's too dangerous here, so it's not suitable for you to stay in the army. But I want to help you. She didn't even think about it before rejecting him. Be good, even without your beast herd, I can still defeat them. Chapter 1394. As soon as Xiao Su finished speaking, he could feel the anger of the person in his embrace. He knew that the result would be like this, but he couldn't bear for her to take the risk. Big Ice Cube, how can you make a unilateral decision? You once promised me that you would let me fight side by side with you. How can you go back on your words? She sat up straight and looked straight into his eyes. Her stubborn eyes did not back down. This time is different from the past. He replied with a slight headache. It's different from the past. You have to let me accompany you. You know that with Little Hai and the others here, our chances of winning will increase. Ian, I must protect your safety. Xiao Su reached out to caress her face, as if he was caressing a flawless jade that was incomparably precious. But your safety is equally important. She softened her tone, took his hand and pressed it against her heart. I've worked hard for so many years, just so that one day I can stand by your side fearlessly. Whether it's glory, wealth, or misfortune, I can share it with you. You can't be so cruel as to deprive me of my right. If you aren't here, what joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? These sincere words moved Xiao Su deeply. What joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? Good, I promise you that I will take you with me wherever I go. I won't leave you behind again. Chu Qingyan finally revealed a smile and reached out to hug him. Her eyes were moist as she rubbed against his shoulder. He reached out to lift her chin and fiercely kissed her. This kiss was even more intense than before. With a wife like this, what more could a husband ask for? When they separated again, she was already lying on the hard bed. She blinked and then pulled on her clothes and shrunk into the corner. This is the military camp. We just consummated our marriage last night. Are you willing to let your husband only watch and not eat? Xiao Su buried his head in her shoulder and his muffled voice entered her ears. Her face was burning hot as she stammered, You are the general. This isn't good. Feeling the person in his embrace tense up, Xiao Su couldn't help but laugh out loud. The pleasant and clear voice made her even more embarrassed. Was the big ice cube for real? She only felt a tightness around her waist before her entire body was pulled into his embrace. Initially, she was still wary of him messing around, but then she heard his amused voice above her head. I was just teasing you. We're only going to sleep. She heaved a sigh of relief, but she still asked, the kind where we just chat under the blanket? What else? He asked with a smile. He wasn't a young brat. He couldn't just focus on pleasure and ignore the big picture. He knew that the little fellow was thinking for him, so he naturally had to think for her as well. Big ice cubes are the best. She chuckled. No response. She had just praised him, and he had started a dye factory. He had even used a teasing tone, but she could not refuse. She held his face with both hands and planted a kiss on his cheek. However, he was not satisfied and returned her a long and shameful kiss. Afraid that something might go wrong, Xiao Su knew when to stop. He hugged her and stroked her long hair from time to time. Didn't you want to chat? Let's chat. He successfully diverted her shyness with one sentence. She quietly leaned on his chest and blinked. Do you think Xiao Ho is trustworthy? Isn't it a bit late for you to ask now? The little fellow only asked when the cooperation had already been negotiated. He couldn't help but chuckle and shake his head. How can that be? At most, we can just break the contract. She raised her eyebrows and snorted. The big ice cube was laughing at her for not thinking things through. I know him, so you don't have to worry. Why? Because only an opponent will understand an opponent. He bent his finger and flicked her forehead. She held her head and rolled her eyes at him. However, her tone was very serious. That's true. You've been fighting for so many years, and no one knows each other better than you. Then I'm relieved. I don't think you're worried about the cooperation. Seeing her rubbing her forehead, he knew that he didn't use any strength, but he still reached out to help her. Enjoying the service of a handsome man, Chu Qingyan comfortably closed her eyes. She didn't feel nervous when he saw through her thoughts. That's right. I'm worried about another thing. Xiao Ho is too cunning. You might think that he's methodical when he does things, but when you look at him carefully, there's no trace of it. I'm afraid that he's too scheming and will devote himself to revenge. In the end, he'll lose all love and be blinded by hatred. Xiao Su didn't say anything and quietly listened to her continue. When I was in the capital, I heard that after Zijing's accident, Xiao Ho seemed to have changed into a different person. I'm not sure if he really has feelings for Zijing. You're afraid that Xiao Ho isn't a good person, and that Princess Pang has entrusted herself to the wrong person? Xiao Su hit the nail on the head. She nodded heavily. Xiao Su rested his chin on the top of her head and stroked her hair. There's one thing you might not know. Huoling found out that the attack on Xiao Ho that day was a collaboration between him and the Prince of Nansong. They directed and acted out a show to frame me, but they missed out on one person. That person was Pang Zijing, who rushed to save him. His reaction after the incident was real, and so was his pain. Chu Qingyan was stunned. Then she clenched her fists and her eyes reddened. She gritted her teeth and said, "So you're saying that he brought all of this upon himself, and Zijing was innocently implicated? Maybe he's already been punished." Xiao Su thought of that day in the hall. His expression didn't seem fake, but more like he was revealing his true feelings. "None of you men are good," she said angrily. Xiao Su rubbed his nose. Was he implicated just like that? TSK, when the city gates catch fire, the fish in the moat suffer. Then you're planning to avenge that good friend of yours? There's still no news from Zijing, but I believe in Yen Luo. Since she's agreed, she'll definitely cure her. One day, she'll stand in front of me in perfect condition. But I won't take revenge on her behalf. I'll tell her the truth and let her make her own decisions. She didn't have the right to judge her friend's life. She would only lend a helping hand when her friend needed it. Ian is so magnanimous. He pecked her. But before that, I won't reveal anything to him. Chu Qingyan snorted. People often didn't cherish what they had when they had it, and only regretted it when they lost it. This was the punishment Xiao Ho deserved. Only by painstakingly teaching him a lesson would he not let her down in the future. Xiao Su couldn't help but worry for his third brother, who had just been promoted to an ally. You can't tell him either. Chu Qingyan thought of something and narrowed her eyes to threaten him. She only felt relieved when he promised not to interfere. During this period of time, she had been wandering from place to place. Not only did she have to avoid her pursuers, but she also had to inquire about their whereabouts. She was so tense that she didn't dare to relax. Now that she was lying next to her sweetheart, her guard down, she was like a harmless child who didn't know anything about the world. She curled up in his arms and fell asleep peacefully. Xiao Su's gaze was gentle as he placed her on his chest, and then he closed his eyes. He hadn't had a good rest for days and nights. Now, he could finally sleep. However, there was a rumor going around in the army. No one knew what kind of situation would await them the next day. Forget it. I can sleep today, but I'll worry about it tomorrow. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.